The immigration battle now shifts once again to the nation's capital, where the president must make his case for more money to seal the southern border. But to many, the details of this plan show something much less about security and much more about pandering to current and future voters. There is a side to this immigration drama many critics believe neither the president nor his apologists are seeing: the human side. We talked to a mother who is now without her son because of lax immigration laws. And America is flexing its financial muscle around the world, and parts of the world are demanding Uncle Sam back down. Does the almighty dollar still have the clout it once enjoyed? Flex your mental muscles. We begin the fastest 3 hours of news and question everything for Monday, July 14th, 2014. Also this hour, the rank stupidity of those who claim to be working for a better America, yet when it comes to election year politics, are proving to be more interested in dragging up personal attacks than real and honest facts, telling it like it is. And much more after John Bachman deals this edition of Newsmax Now.
Thank you for that, Ed. As a crisis on the border worsened, Texans are growing more and more skeptical of President Obama's request for emergency funding. While President Obama claims the nearly $4 billion requested would help border security, some say it's really just a social services bill aimed at aiding illegal immigrants. According to a breakdown from the USA Today, most of the money requested will go towards providing better housing for illegals while they're in custody, not protecting the border. In fact, only $433 million of the $3.7 billion requested, that's less than 12%, would go to Customs and Border Protection. Another big chunk of that $4 billion, nearly 50%, would go to Health and Human Services to care for the illegal immigrants, which some say proves the administration is not serious about sending them back home. Meantime, Texas Governor Rick Perry says the crisis could have been prevented years ago.
It could have been stopped years ago had the administration listened, had the administration been focused on the border with Texas.
Meanwhile, Senator Rand Paul says that even with the crisis at the U.S.-Mexican border, Texas Governor Rick Perry still finds time to attack Paul's stance on foreign policy. In an open letter from the Kentucky senator to the Texas governor, Paul says Perry fictionalized his views in address to the governor. Rand Paul says some of Perry's solutions for the current chaos in Iraq aren't much different from what I proposed, something he fails to mention. His solutions also aren't much different from President Obama's. The Republican senator is referring to Rick Perry's allegations that Rand Paul is an isolationist. Paul responded to those claims by writing this, quote, "Does Perry now believe that we should send U.S. troops back into Iraq? I asked Governor Perry how many Texas mothers and fathers will he ask to send their children to fight in Iraq?" Paul also says that in that letter that an overwhelming majority of Americans don't want to send American soldiers back to Iraq, and asked, quote, "Is Perry calling for the entire country, or is calling the entire country isolationist too? This looks like the beginning of an ongoing battle we'll see much more of as we ramp up to the 2016 presidential elections." Meantime, overseas, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in Vienna meeting with his Iranian counterpart Javad Zarif today. This is the second consecutive day of talks between the two officials. The subject is Tehran's nuclear program. Next week, we'll see the July 20th deadline arrive, and that's when the P5+1 partners are supposed to have a firm deal in place. A senior State Department official said Kerry is there, quote, to gauge Iran's willingness to make the critical choices, quote, it needs to make. More news ahead in 30 minutes.
While the immigration crisis grips America and the nation seeks any real leadership in protecting this country and the citizens who are legally here, there are those who constantly remind us of the human equation. But those calls usually fall on deaf ears when those debates conveniently gloss over the human tragedy that has gripped American families who have to come to deal with the fallout of an immigration policy that has not been enforced for many years and has in some instances created terrible collateral damage. In the early morning hours of May 12th this year, while on his way home from work, Mesa, Arizona Police Sergeant Brandon Mendoza was simply going home. And the American immigration failure ended his life and forced a mother to take matters into her own hands. Let's welcome to MidPoint that mother who was seeking to take on the president and those failed immigration policies. Let's welcome Marianne Mendoza to the show. Ms. Mendoza, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Would you please tell us a little bit about your son? I gave a very brief outline of what happened, but could you fill in some of the gaps here and tell us exactly what happened on that night?
Sure. Brandon had worked his shift as normal. Brandon was a very, just an unbelievable, selfless, humble human being who helped people on a daily basis. Had been given a big project in Mesa on the south side of cleaning up a park area, which he had done diligently for almost a year and a half, and had helped many, many people, gotten rid of crime and drug dealers, and made a park in a neighborhood family friendly again, where people felt like they could take their children. The children looked up to him. He got security cameras installed in the park so that the children felt that they could be there playing basketball. And several of them said that they always knew Brandon was there watching. They could look up on the hill and see him parked with binoculars watching over them while they were playing. He was a big advocate of getting crime off the streets and drug dealers and just making the community safe.
The accident itself, would you tell us what happened?
He was driving home from work, and a chase had been going on for quite a while on 4 different valley freeways for probably 35 miles of an illegal who was driving drunk and high on meth. And Brandon was on an off ramp. It was a single lane off ramp, merging from one freeway to the other. And this man was driving the wrong way and hit my son head on and killed him. He had no insurance. He had no insurance. He had no driver's license, yet he was able to register a vehicle to drive. And, you know, a vehicle is a lethal weapon, especially when you're behind the wheel drunk and high on meth. And I just feel that something needs to happen, and the American public needs to stand up and stop being afraid to say something about illegal immigration, especially illegals who are committing crimes in our country and killing our brothers, our sisters, our sons, our husbands, our mothers. You know, it's an epidemic that needs to be stopped.
You wrote a letter to President Obama, and the letter has been reprinted in several different newspapers. The Arizona Republic, I believe, is one, and several other places have carried it. It was a rather lengthy letter where you were very, very emotional about what you thought happened and what you were asking the president. We are showing just a part of the letter here that says, "This man, this repeated lawbreaker, was allowed to be released, and he continued breaking the laws in our country until what? Until what? I want answers that make sense. I want answers from you personally as to why this criminal was allowed to stay in our country until he took my son's life." Have you had any response to your correspondence with the White House?
Absolutely not.
How long ago did you write that letter?
And he may act like he's getting rid of the criminals in this country, but what he's doing is lowering the standard of what we expect from illegal immigrants in this country. He's lowering the standards. He's raising the limit of the amount of laws they're able to break and the crimes they're able to commit before they can be deported. And, you know, we're lowering the standard in this country and allowing people in this country who have no business being here, and if they're actually looking for a better life, then come here and make a better life. Don't come here and create chaos and kill U.S. citizens.
There are many people who, every time the discussion comes up about these immigrants, they will call them refugees instead, as you just alluded to, just slightly there, that they will call them refugees, simply coming here looking for a better way of life. What then would you and others, let's just talk about you. What do you want to see happen in order to still remain humanitarian towards these people and still allow them to become citizens and make this country all one group of legal citizens?
It's like I said in my letter, I raise my children not to see a person's skin color, but to see how they conduct their lives. This country's made from people immigrating here. However, there is a right and a wrong way to do it. And all of our ancestors did it the right way. They lived a life abiding by the laws. And to just think that you can come over the border and create a new life and commit crimes, and you're sent back and you're deported, and you change your name and you come back over the border and you start it all over again. This is the kind of activity that I want to stop. The government has got to understand that maybe the whole country doesn't experience it like this, the states that border Mexico, Texas, New Mexico, California, Arizona. It is a widespread daily occurrence. Just the day before yesterday, a friend of my son's who's on the police force responded to a call where a 3-year-old child was killed by an illegal woman driving with no driver's license, no insurance or anything. This is a daily occurrence here in Arizona.
You mentioned Arizona, and it's fair to point out that the gentleman you're speaking of, Raul Silva Corona, the wrong-way driver, blood alcohol content was nearly 3 times the legal limit at the time of the crash, was in the country illegally. Prosecutors were lenient, according to you, when Corona was convicted of crimes in Colorado. How much does this also then speak to the local effort, to the state effort in order to try and ferret this out? Because obviously the courts in Colorado allowed him to get away.
Right. And he really wasn't apprehended for those crimes until 2002 when he was crossing the border back into the United States, and they sent him up to Adams County in Colorado. And as far as I know from the investigation I've done, there's been no jail time served by him. Assault, burglary, leaving the scene of an accident were all crimes that were dismissed under his plea agreement. We've got Sheriff Joe Arpaio here in Maricopa County in Arizona, who is tough on this sort of thing, but the federal government cripples his efforts at every turn. And illegal immigrant civil rights groups. It's just time to understand that the law is the law, and things need to be done in a legal process. And if you don't want to do things legally and follow the process and abide by our laws, then you don't need to be in our country. And that's how I feel. My son would be alive if the federal government, if immigration had taken control of the situation in 2002 when he was coming back over the border, eluding the law for how long? And if you and I had done that, we are held accountable at a different level than the illegals are. And that's what I'm so frustrated over.
You have written a letter to the president that people can read in many different locations. We've shared a little piece of it here right now. But you haven't heard from the president. No one from the White House has gotten back to you. No one has decided to answer your request, your mother's plea, if you will, to do something. How angry are you right now?
It actually doesn't surprise me, because I don't think that he understands things on a human level when it affects people as personally as this has affected me. Case in point, when he did not want to go down to the border in Texas when he was there, it's like I've said, you can hear a rock concert on the radio. If you don't experience it in person, you have no idea what it's about, the sounds, the feeling. And that's the same thing about not going down to the border. You have to go down there and experience it. You have to be around it. You have to hear the noise. You have to see the faces. You have to understand on a first-hand basis from people in the United States who've been affected by this and the hurt that it's caused. And this isn't just another issue. I'm not going to allow my son's death to be a statistic, like I said in my letter. My son meant too much to me and too much to this community for this just to be swept under the rug and just be another story that was on the news for a week.
I have to imagine that you've spent pretty much every night since in tears.
Oh, absolutely. It's gotten worse in the last few weeks, strictly because things have died down, and it's just allowed me more time to think about it. And he's giving me the strength to do this on his behalf. I have to do this in his honor.
And I have about 25 seconds left. Again, look the president in the eye right now. Give him 20 seconds. What would you say to him?
I would say, President Obama, I need answers. I need to know that you understand the issues that I've brought to light and the things that I've talked about on the news and on the radio in the last week, that you understand on a personal level how this is affecting us, and it can't just be generalized anymore. And the standards for people coming into this country cannot be lowered any lower than they are.
Mary Ann Mendoza, we thank you so much for your time. I know it's a painful time for you and your family. We will stay in touch. We will stay on the story. You bring forth a very powerful and important message. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Our condolences to your family as well.
Meet Mary. She loves to shop online with her debit card. And so does Bill, an identity thief who stole Mary's identity, took over her bank accounts, and stole her hard-earned money. Unfortunately, millions of Americans just like you learn all it may take is a little misplaced information to wreak havoc on your life. This is identity theft, and no one helps stop it better than LifeLock. LifeLock offers the most comprehensive identity theft protection available. If Mary had LifeLock's bank account alerts, she may have been notified before it was too late. LifeLock's credit notification service is on the job 24/7. As soon as they detect a threat to your identity within their network, they will alert you, protecting you before the damage is done. LifeLock has the most comprehensive identity theft protection available, guarding your social security number, your money, your credit, even the equity in your home.
My years as a prosecutor taught me that we all need to protect ourselves from crime. In today's world, that includes identity theft. It's a serious problem. We all have to protect ourselves.
While identity theft can't be completely stopped, no one works harder to protect you than LifeLock. You even get a $1 million service guarantee. That's security no one can beat. You have so much to protect and nothing to lose when you call LifeLock right now and get 60 days of identity theft protection risk-free. That's right, 60 days risk-free. Use promo code NOTME. Order now and get this document shredder to keep sensitive documents out of the wrong hands. A $29 value, free. Don't wait until you become the next victim. Call 1-800-918-3128 for 60 days of LifeLock identity theft protection risk-free and get a document shredder free. Use promo code NOTME. Call 1-800-918-3128 now.
Now on Newsmax TV. Paul Ryan is a GOP rising star. Will he run for president in 2016? Watch the Malsberg Show on Newsmax TV and find out. Go now to Newsmax TV.
Just those comments. I may ask you about those and what some of the repercussions are in Washington of those today.
Got it.
Okay, thank you, sir. We'll be with you in a little bit.
I do not like this Katrina analogy.
This was Barack Obama's Hurricane Katrina.
It doesn't make sense to compare this to a natural disaster.
President Obama's Katrina.
It's a Katrina moment, right?
So I hope this doesn't become the Katrina moment for President Obama.
Hurricane Sandy brought much of the Northeast to a standstill. This is starting to look like, in my opinion, Obama's Katrina.
BP's spill is President Obama's Katrina.
The largest oil spill in our nation's history. While some say this could be President Obama's Katrina.
And the award for false equivalency of the year goes to... I knew it! The idea that the rollout of Obamacare is Obama's Katrina moment.
When the President of the United States asks Congress to confirm almost $4 million to spend, it would make many believe there is some definitive action coming. After all, that much money has to be able to make a real difference in whatever form it's being spent. Right? But the President's request for those funds in relation to the current immigration crisis are raising a tremendous amount of eyebrows. They are gripping this country right now, a country that has more than a few on both sides of the aisle up in arms. For closer examination reveals it's not all about protecting America, but perhaps pandering to a current and future voter base. Explanations and discussion all around. Welcome into MidPoint. The executive editor of the Washington Examiner, Mark Tapscott, joins us again from D.C. Mark, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
Mark, I wanted you to first comment on what we just heard, a number of sound bites, because it seems as if Obama's Katrina is now the catchphrase around the Washington media corps, or at least around the national media corps. Is it a fair analogy in your opinion?
Well, I think it's certainly a very misunderstood analogy, because the problem in the Katrina situation for George Bush was not the hurricane per se, but the inability seeming at the time of the federal government to respond in an effective way. And in that sense, I think it is a good analogy to what's happening today, where we see a crisis on our border and grave doubts from a lot of folks on both sides of the partisan aisle about the adequacy or lack thereof of what the president is doing, if anything.
Well, that, I guess, comes to the next point here. Can you give us a feel in Washington, D.C., what it is like and what is being said about what is termed the president's complete disregard for concern about this? I take us now back to last week in Denver, where he's seen playing pool with Colorado Governor Hickenlooper, basically not going to the border.
Right.
There's a lot of people saying that this is just a president who is so completely out of touch that he doesn't care about his own people. But then again, at the same point, you have to ask why. He obviously sees this. He knows what people are saying. He knows what people are seeing here. So how can anybody be this completely, to use the phraseology and make it simple, clueless?
That is exactly the question, I think, that is on the minds of many people here in Washington, D.C. The Washington Post, which is very much the voice of the Washington establishment, if you will, has a very interesting article yesterday, I believe, on the front page that basically asks the question or poses the possibility that the immigration issue, the political dynamics of it, are changing because of this immigration crisis and changing in a way that I suspect nobody in the Obama White House expected it to. It's changing the context of the debate in order to make the question of border security, everybody can see, I mean, it's right here on our television screens, that border security has to be the first priority before anything else is done. And yet that's exactly the point on which the president refuses to act. So it is a very, very strange atmosphere here because it doesn't lend itself to an understandable, if you will, explanation, easy explanation.
Is it fair to say then that when we look at this almost $4 billion that the president is asking for, $1.8 billion goes to the Department of Health and Human Services for the care of unaccompanied children, including shelter and medical care, plus then, if you go to the other side of this, $64 million to the Department of Justice, much of this money to be spent on hiring 40 additional teams of immigration judges.
Right.
Is it fair to say that if you were to go around Washington and kind of get to some of the insiders here who don't always want their names to be used in comments, that even they would say this bill completely smacks, this request rather, completely smacks of doing nothing more than to try and create a palm front, if you will, a hand to the community here to not only get to Hispanic American voters today, but to create the next generation of Hispanic American voters, that it seems to be planned.
Well, I don't know if you can say that it's people here are assuming that it's planned. I'm sure there are a lot of people who do think that that's probably the case. The significant thing to me is that when you look at the details of the bill, the $4 billion that the president has requested, virtually none of it, there is a very small portion of it, but a very small portion that would actually, you could argue, say, help strengthen the border or restore border security. But the vast majority of the funds are going to be spent taking care of and, frankly, providing legal defenses to these folks that have come over into the country illegally. You know, nobody wants to see children suffer, but the assumption that appears to govern how this particular request was put together was that this is more or less the new normal, if you will, and therefore we have to simply find ways to cope with it rather than seeking to find ways to stop the problem.
Mark, what is next is what America really wants to know, because it is obvious that this bill is going to be, this request, I keep calling it a bill, I want to go back to just calling it the request for money here, that this request is going to be looked at by Congress. It's not going to happen in 24 hours. It won't happen in 24 days, perhaps. It may not happen in months. So what exactly is the thinking process in Washington and what can happen in a short period of time to try and at least stem the tide of what's happening here, to at least slow it down?
Well, I'm not so sure that it won't pass, and perhaps even in a reasonably short period of time. And here's why I say that. Washington has this tremendous capacity for figuring out how to use a bill to accomplish all manner of purposes that don't really have anything at all to do with the stated purpose of it. And there's already been talk that there will be offers from the White House, unofficially of course, through the usual back channels in Congress, to in effect turn this into a Christmas tree where in effect you buy votes of people who would otherwise be inclined to vote against it. And I think that's probably what's going to happen because the White House political strategists, I'm sure they realize that's probably the only way they're going to get any kind of a bill through. And if that's what it takes, you know, they're not particularly worried about spending more money if that's what it takes, as long as they get the money that they're looking for their reasons. So I think we will see something pass Congress. I don't think it'll happen this week, maybe next week.
We've heard in recent weeks a number of Democrats that have gone against the president, have spoken out publicly against him. Some of them have been slapped down by the White House very quietly, very nicely. Would it be your understanding that while we've heard a few, that there's a lot more out there who would like to say something but are really keeping their mouth shut at the moment simply because they don't want to be taken to task publicly?
Well, I think you can assume that there have been a lot of phone calls from very worried Democrats, especially those in the House who face re-election, and those who in the Senate, like Mary Landrieu, for example, or Mark Udall in Colorado, who face very, very tough re-election fights, probably saying in very blunt terms, you guys have made a mess here, and you better find a way to fix it quick, because if you don't, the whole, as the Washington Post suggested in that story that I alluded to earlier, what is happening is the immigration debate, which has previously been at least perceived to be one that's very favorable to Democrats, is being turned around into one that is very unfavorable to Democrats. And you can bet that the political folks in the White House, they are desperately looking for a way to get this thing settled down, at least to get it off the front page.
We've got about 30 seconds left here. There really is no win, though, for the president. Isn't it fair to say that he has dug a hole so deep here that simply there's very little way to come out of this on a positive sense?
That's perhaps the biggest obstacle in this town to getting things done that need to be done. President Obama, you know, whether you like him or you don't, I think everybody sees now that he is very obstinate once he takes a position. He doesn't like to talk to Congress. He doesn't like to negotiate. And that makes it very difficult to get things done, like addressing the real issues involved here.
Almost impossible indeed. Mark Tapscott from the Washington Examiner. Thanks so much for joining us, Mark. We'll do it again.
My pleasure.
As he said, Washington, a unique place indeed. Check in with the mothership coming up next. On the website for the latest breaking news, terrorist bombs, Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, and an American company's involvement in the illegal immigrant death train. That and a whole lot more coming up next as we continue right here on MidPoint.
Do you sleep too hot while your partner sleeps too cool? Do you struggle to sleep at the right temperature? Now Sleep Number has a solution that's as revolutionary as its beds. Introducing the Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer. The amazing Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer allows both of you to select your ideal temperature for better sleep. The Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer works with any mattress brand. It features active air technology, which evenly distributes air to heat and cool each side to the temperature you prefer for head-to-toe comfort. Call or click now for this free $50 savings card and catalog.
My husband and I both prefer different temperatures. He likes to have his side of the bed a little bit warmer, and I like to have mine a little bit cooler, and we are finally sleeping better together.
After sleeping on a dual temp layer, I find that I have such a restful night's sleep that when I wake up in the morning, I am energized and I'm ready for the day.
All night long, you can each enjoy sleep at a temperature that perfectly matches what your body needs for comfortable sleep, so you can sleep better together. In a research study, 75% reported poor sleep because of their sleeping temperature. That's because your body's temperature naturally fluctuates at night. But with the Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer, you can sleep comfortably warm or cool. And because the revolutionary Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer helps solve an important sleep problem, it was selected as a very innovative product by Good Housekeeping. Remember, the Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer can be added to any mattress brand, so everyone can enjoy sleeping better at the perfect temperature. Call or click now.
Call 1-800-317-5283 or click now for a free $50 savings card and catalog with price list. For your peace of mind, the Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer comes with a 100-night in-home trial. Call 1-800-317-5283 or click now. That's 1-800-317-5283 for your free $50 savings card and catalog.
Are you feeling tired, run down, low on energy? Well, you could be just like millions of Americans whose thyroid gland isn't functioning the way it's supposed to. Well, now there's hope to change all of that. Introducing Actilin. Actilin is a premium nutritional supplement designed to support optimal thyroid function. Actilin has 17 powerful ingredients that support adrenal health, thyroid function, energy, and your immune system. Actilin was formulated by the renowned holistic practitioner, Dr. David Brownstein. And now, for a limited time, you can get a free bottle of Actilin with our special offer. You pay only for shipping and handling. Act right now and get Dr. Brownstein's free special report, A Doctor's Guide to a Healthy Thyroid. Get Actilin and the special report. Sign up today at getactilin.com. That's getactilin.com. Or call us at the number below.
Hello, I'm John Bachman. Welcome to this Newsmax Now update. A 15-year-old girl who survived a relative's rampage, which killed her parents and 4 younger siblings, made her first public appearance since the attack this past weekend.
I know that my mom, dad, Brian, Emily, Becca, and Zach are in a much better place, and that I'll be able to see them again one day. I'm really thankful for all of the people that have been praying for me and keeping me and my family in their thoughts.
That is a very strong young woman there. Investigators say the shooting was carried out by that girl, Cassidy's aunt's ex-husband. Authorities say the 33-year-old man stormed into the home, the family home, and shot Cassidy's parents and siblings, who ranged in age from 4 to 13. Cassidy survived by playing dead. She then called police and told them the shooter intended to go to her grandparents' house next. Her head was actually grazed by a bullet. You couldn't see that there. Her aunt's ex-husband, who you see right here, appeared in court collapsing twice as the prosecutor read the charges and the details of the crime. And you're looking at a time-lapse video of the shipwrecked Costa Concordia being raised by flotation tanks today. The operation took 8 hours to refloat the wreckage. It'll now be towed away for scrapping. In 2012, the ship slammed into a reef off the Italian coast. 32 people died. The ship's captain is now on trial for charges of manslaughter. He steered that ship too close to land and then abandoned the ship before everyone else had evacuated. I'm John Bachman. More news ahead in 30 minutes.
No website breaks more news from more sources than the Newsmax Mothership webpage. That's where we head next to get the latest from the front page and more. Newsmax managing editor Tim Colley joins us on the show. Good Monday, Tim. How are you?
Hey, good Monday to you, Ed. How are you doing?
It's another day in paradise, my friends. Let's get right back to it. All right, here we go. Top of the page right now as we speak. Governors, mayors rebuff Obama plan to house child immigrants. We're seeing a lot of stories come across anymore from mayors and governors and different elected officials in different states as far-flung as Maine, Massachusetts, who are complaining that the government is sending children to their states and not even telling them.
Yeah, this is a complete turnaround in the common wisdom, which was the thinking was that immigration was an issue that's going to benefit Democrats. But this is coming from Democratic mayors, Democratic governors, Republicans across the country, and it's pretty much uniform right now. They don't want the federal government dumping people in their backyard, especially if they're not being told, as the governor of Nebraska is currently alleging.
Well, that's exactly what they're getting down to. They're calling it dumping. A lot of the government officials are coming back and saying we have to house them somewhere. But you do touch on a point that we just touched on a couple of moments ago with Mark Tapscott from the Washington Examiner, which is already we have people not being told. We have the government being secretive, and we also have this desire by the government, it seems, to hold back what they're doing here, and that Democrats themselves are now angry. I don't think that there's any way the administration thought they would get this kind of a pushback from their own people.
No, they clearly didn't. And when you look back on it, hindsight is 20/20. But from a governor's point of view, from a mayor's point of view, they're coming off the worst economy, as we all are, since the Great Depression. They're very cash-strapped. So all of a sudden, they're going to have an influx of people they don't know, children in their schools, people in different community centers. They all have to be paid for, not even if you're thinking in terms of competition for low-wage jobs. So this is, this is across the board, and it's very, very unclear where the money is going to come from to support these people once they land in your community.
All right, got about a minute left here. Sergeant Bo Bergdahl returns to active duty in Texas. I don't think a lot of people thought he'd be back on active duty this fast.
Yeah, I think the problem here is the phrase active duty. I think he's going to be little more than a glorified clerk with 2 bodyguards. I mean, he's clearly not going to be near any weapons. And what task he's actually doing is very unclear. He's going to have 2 roommates, but it's clear they're going to be specialists in the trauma he's going through and will be watching his every move.
It's fair to say, indeed, that some people are still reading into it perhaps a little more than is actually there at this time. So much more on the Newsmax website. Tim, always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. We'll talk to you again tomorrow and catch up.
Thanks, Ed. Have a great day.
All right, you too. And also something else that we alluded to very briefly. American company faces charges over death train used by illegals. It's been called the Beast, used by people from Central America to travel from Mexico to the United States. There is now charges filed against an American company that owns the train. That's all on Newsmax.com. Right now, let's take a moment to celebrate what makes America special. And this time, it's a hockey team. It's in this American Moment.
History calls it a miracle. The 1980 13th Winter Olympic Games were in full force in Lake Placid, New York. Months earlier, the Soviet troops had invaded Afghanistan, and President Jimmy Carter was threatening to boycott the Summer Olympic Games scheduled to be played in Moscow. But all U.S. Olympic hockey team coach Herb Brooks was thinking about was winning games. His team was the youngest hockey team to ever compete in the Olympics. In spite of their age and inexperience, only 2 teams stood between them and Olympic gold. The first was the mighty Soviets, whose team consisted of seasoned world-class players who just a year earlier had soundly defeated the National Hockey League's all-star team. The last time the Soviets had played these Americans in an exhibition game, the Soviets dominated 10-3. Sports commentators openly remarked that the only thing that could keep the Soviets from winning the gold would be if the ice melted. But the Americans, led by their captain Mike Eruzione, had other ideas. As the game got underway, the Soviets quickly scored, and by the end of the second period, led 3-2. A little after 8 minutes into the third period, Mark Johnson's goal tied the game. And then with just 10 minutes left to play, Mike Eruzione fired a shot past his defender to give the Americans the lead. The last seconds of the game tell it all.
Is there. The puck is still loose. 11 seconds. You've got 10 seconds. The countdown going on right now. Morrow up to Silk. 5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
For Newsmax TV, I'm Bill Curtis, and this is an American Moment.
When Bob got into the accident, I was terrified. His injuries were so severe, but once we knew he was going to be okay, what then?
I couldn't go back to work for a long time, and we got way behind on our bills.
We'd hired an attorney, but when our case kept dragging on, we didn't know how we were going to get by. Thankfully, our attorney knew about Oasis Legal Finance.
Oasis looked at our case and got us the money the very next day.
What a relief it was. We didn't have to wait until our case settled, and the money from Oasis helped us when we needed it most.
At first, I wasn't so sure. What if we lost the case? How would we be able to pay back Oasis? But then I found out if we did lose, we wouldn't have to pay them back, so there was no risk in doing it. No risk.
If you were involved in an accident and hired an attorney to fight for the compensation you deserve but need money now before your case settles, then call Oasis today. Oasis has given millions of dollars to people like you who need money fast while waiting for their case to settle. There's no risk, so call now.
I was hurt badly in a car accident just after my wife gave birth. We were counting on the cash from my lawsuit to get caught up, but the case took forever.
Honestly, we didn't know what we were going to do. Then we saw an Oasis TV commercial and called. We were approved and got money from Oasis the next day.
Not in a week, the very next day.
I was hurt at work and filed a workers' comp claim. I called Oasis and they gave me the cash I needed. Unfortunately, I ended up losing my case, but Oasis let us keep the money. They kept their promise and we didn't need to pay them back.
There are no out-of-pocket costs and no payments until your case is settled. If you lose your case, you don't have to repay Oasis. There's no risk. Call Oasis now to see how much money you can get before your case settles.
Call now, 1-800-562-8184. 1-800-562-8184. 1-800-562-8184.
The land of the free honors the bravest of the brave for their sacred pledge to protect our freedoms, our Constitution, and our way of life. We will always remember you. We will always salute you.
The Department of Justice submitted to the United States District Court a criminal information against BNP, one of the largest banks in the world, for conspiring with other entities to deliberately and repeatedly violate long-standing United States sanctions against Sudan, Cuba, and Iran. BNP will plead guilty to conspiring to violate United States sanctions. They are taking a variety of steps to provide substantial cooperation to the government and to ensure that moving forward, they will operate in full compliance with United States law.
All too often we hear about how the American dollar is taking a beating around the world, how China actually owns us because of the massive debt, and how some countries might seek to take advantage of a perceived weakness. As always, the truth is somewhat more revealing, as America wraps some knuckles and Germany is perhaps knuckling under to Vladimir Putin. How all this affects American dollars and much more. But first, a little background, if you will, because we're not talking a few $100,000 here. We're not talking a few million. We're talking billions of dollars here that this affects between the United States and some of its partners. You heard Eric Holder there a few moments ago discuss BNP Paribas. That is a French bank. They are expected to pay up to $9 billion in a potential criminal settlement of U.S. charges. The French banking giant violated economic sanctions. The economic sanctions are interesting here because what it does, it deals with specific entities that the United States, who still has a tremendous amount of control in the financial side of things globally, is telling them you cannot do business with certain countries. Those countries are Sudan, Iran, and Cuba. Now, U.S. authorities still negotiating some other related issues here. Outlines of an anticipated guilty plea demands that more than a dozen bank workers be terminated and restrictions on the bank's dollar clearing authorization be changed. Now, this is all, again, just deep cover here and part of what's happening. The case is focusing on allegations that the bank, and this again comes down to the countries that these banks are doing business with, that the United States says, well, if you're going to use our dollars and our system of economy here, that you have to then follow our rules. It focuses on allegations that the bank processed billions of dollars in transactions involving Sudan, Iran, and Cuba, even though the deals were banned by U.S. economic sanctions. This is imposed in a response to terrorism, human rights abuses, and other issues. Many of you will go back to 9/11, the horrible attack on America here. The American government has tried to take steps since then to see if they can keep as much money as possible out of the hands of these nations that basically are involved in terrorism on a daily basis. So you have $9 billion there. But wait, it gets better, because the United States still has decided to go after a few more banks. And there is one bank here that has a real interesting point when it comes down to how it's going to affect American interests around the world. You have two other banks here, Commerzbank and Deutsche Bank. Commerzbank in Germany is the second largest lender. They are 17% owned by the German government. So take a moment, think for a second here what we're talking about, because let's not forget that in recent weeks, recent months, we have had a number of instances where the NSA has been found to be spying on Germany, German officials, German elected officials, German corporate officials, and Angela Merkel and the Germans are not pleased at all with the Americans right now. So you have a bank that is 70% owned by the U.S. government. We're talking here settlement talks, and these could even further hurt, further damage the relations between Berlin and Washington. Commerzbank is accused by U.S. authorities of transferring money through its U.S. operations on behalf of companies in Iran and Sudan. Again, we are talking about the same countries here that the United States is trying to see if they can keep money out of the hands of potential terrorists. This is Commerzbank, that could pay $500 million in penalties. Certainly nothing like what the French bank has paid, but we're still talking $500 million in penalties. Deutsche Bank has said it stopped doing new business with Iran in 2007. So here you have two massive banks sitting here that the United States is looking to punish. Whether or not they actually will be able to punish these banks, that is something altogether different. Couple of minutes we have left here. Let's welcome an adjunct professor of corporate finance at Seton Hall University, former New York City mayoral candidate Cecilia Berkowitz joins us. Cecilia, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Good
Cecilia,
to be here.
what is the big deal here? Because I tried to put this in perspective here when it comes down to the United States trying to stop dollars going to the countries that foster terrorism here. That immediately stands out here. But isn't it fair to say that the United States still has an economic hammer here that they can drop, and they did catch these, allegedly did catch these banks doing business with the wrong people?
Yeah, well, the first thing we learn in international business law and international ethics is that you have to obey the law for the countries you're in and when they affect you internationally. So it definitely was the responsibility of BNP Paribas and Commerce Bank to follow the laws of those countries. If not, they are criminal fines. Now, are those fines enough to penalize the banks? I think, yes, it is, especially considering that BNP Paribas has a year restriction, year ban doing business in U.S. dollars. And this affects the economy so much, as the French finance minister said, they want the euro to be more important in payments in the global economy, and also smaller currencies, not just the dollar. So they're worried about the dollar being so important that when the French and other banks do these crimes in the euro region, that they are severely affected by this.
The American dollar still has an awful lot of play around the world, doesn't it? Some people still seem to believe, for whatever reason, that we've been weakened and we're no longer as strong as we once were.
Yeah, historically speaking, there was a gold standard that used to back the dollar, and with the Bretton Woods system that then collapsed. And now we have dollar as a floating currency with the trust of the greenback. And a lot of countries are pegged to the U.S. dollar or the U.S. currency historically and currently. And the U.S. dollar and its exchange rates affects the global economy.
I've got about 45 seconds left here. Janet Yellen goes before Congress tomorrow. What should we expect?
What I read and what I've heard is that there should be expectations for her to talk about an easy monetary policy, which I think is good because that will further help unemployment, further help the economy be healthy and improve. I think that she may also talk about how they may raise interest rates sooner than expected because the economy has been somewhat good, including unemployment, like we discussed before. And I think she may raise they may raise interest rates in the middle of next year. She may discuss a bit of that. Financial markets should react slightly positively to this. I don't think there'll be any newsbreaker that will see so shocking that the stock markets will do incredibly well, but I think they should be slightly higher after hearing her testimony.
I think Janet Yellen will be happy if nothing really comes out of it, and she can just skate through 2 days and be very happy and go home without having to be just hammered as she has been in the past.
Yeah, that probably is what's going to happen then. So I'm sure she has a lot of power and can make that happen.
Probably so. Cecilia Berkowitz, thanks so much for joining us. We'll do it again.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Coming up next, another example of juvenile politics being played with personal attacks that should have no bearing on who runs this country. It's still up to you to make the decision. Talk about that and more when MidPoint continues, because every day, right here, we question everything.
Smile.
No matter how well you provide for your family today, if you don't have life insurance, their future may be at risk. Think about what would happen if you were gone. Would they struggle to pay the bills and face an uncertain future? They don't have to. You can help guarantee those you love $200,000, $500,000, $750,000 or more with life insurance through AIG Direct. We'll help you get more for your money, up to 70% more. Just look, less than $14 a month buys a 40-year-old man a $250,000 term life policy. That's up to 3 times what you can get from other companies for the same price. No wonder millions of people rely on AIG companies. The call is free, the quote is free, and there's no obligation. Make the future more secure for those you love. Call now so you can sleep better at night.
For a free quote, call 1-800-558-5246 or visit AIGdirect.com.
Meet Mary. She loves to shop online with her debit card.
And so does Bill, an identity thief who stole Mary's identity, took over her bank accounts, and stole her hard-earned money. Unfortunately, millions of Americans just like you learn all it may take is a little misplaced information to wreak havoc on your life. This is identity theft, and no one helps stop it better than LifeLock. LifeLock offers the most comprehensive identity theft protection available. If Mary had LifeLock's bank account alerts, she may have been notified before it was too late. LifeLock's credit notification service is on the job 24/7. As soon as they detect a threat to your identity within their network, they will alert you, protecting you before the damage is done. LifeLock has the most comprehensive identity theft protection available, guarding your social security number, your money, your credit, even the equity in your home.
My years as a prosecutor taught me that we all need to protect ourselves from crime. In today's world, that includes identity theft. It's a serious problem. We all have to protect ourselves.
While identity theft can't be completely stopped, no one works harder to protect you than LifeLock. You even get a $1 million service guarantee. That's security no one can beat. You have so much to protect and nothing to lose. When you call LifeLock right now and get 60 days of identity theft protection risk-free. That's right, 60 days risk-free. Use promo code NOTME. Order now and get this document shredder to keep sensitive documents out of the wrong hands. A $29 value, free. Don't wait until you become the next victim. Call 1-800-918-3128 for 60 days of LifeLock identity theft protection risk-free and get a document shredder free. Use promo code NOTME. Call 1-800-918-3128 now.
Mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 58 years old. 8 years into the disease was when all the light went out.
For me, it was heart-wrenching.
Looking into the eyes of somebody with Alzheimer's, sometimes you just don't see the person's soul is like gone.
And it takes a toll on everyone. I mean, it's a depressing disease to watch unfold before your eyes.
She actually thought those of us who were caring for her and who loved her most were her worst enemies.
More and more responsibilities fell on my shoulders.
This disease just ravages a family.
It changes your life.
The magnitude of it is indescribable. My mother taught me to be in the moment.
We have to live in the moment with them.
And I'm going to be with that person right now in this moment, wherever she is.
Now is the moment. If we work together, we can stop this epidemic.
Contact Bright Focus and learn more.
Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez tramples on basic human rights and silences critical media. He's also said, "If I was from the United States, I'd vote for Obama." Russia's Vladimir Putin supplies weapons to terrorists, supports Iran's nuclear ambitions, and calls President Obama an honest man who really wants to change much for the better. Even Fidel Castro once called Obama the most progressive candidate to the U.S. presidency. Chavez, Putin, Castro, Obama secured the dictator vote. Does he have yours? Campaign for American Values PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
We have already begun yet another political cycle in many states with runoff elections. We've seen them all. We've talked about them. And it's heading full steam right into your living room and face for the midterms. That time when we will be bombarded with political campaign ads of all types featuring claims, counterclaims, smear, mud, everything else that makes America the interesting political arena that it is. And more often than not makes us see how far we've come on one side and how far we have to go on the other. We have ads that will be rife with inaccuracies, yet despite the fact they often stretch the truth to new and astounding lengths, they are considered by just about everyone to be the cost of doing business.
I'm Bill Nelson, and I approve this message.
With a history of bar brawls, altercations, and road rage, a trail of unpaid debts and tax liens, one of the worst attendance records in Congress this year, while still taking his $174,000 salary, and a plan that could cut trillions from Medicare, Social Security, and defense. No wonder Florida's newspapers have said Connie Mack IV is in no way qualified to be a senator and has no business holding any elected office.
A check on the ad by PolitiFact found as you might expect. For instance, the bar brawls talked about here go back to 1989 when Mac was 22 years of age. The road rage was also in the 1980s, was in response to Mac being attacked by a driver, and there was never any further investigation. And the claim about missing votes is again taken out of context. Fair to not say, or fair to also add in here, that the response ads Mac ran against Nelson were also filled with stretches of truth and inaccuracies. Happens all the time. It will happen again, and it remains your decision on which claims you believe, how much research you do to ensure you're voting for the right candidate, and how much hot air you're going to allow to be blown down your shirt and or up your skirt. But these are claims based on performance. When it becomes personal, a simple line should never be crossed, ever, without fail. The personal line. Several reputable websites, including Talking Points Memo and news agencies such as Reuters, were buzzing over the weekend with a story chock full of everything that is not only wrong with the American political system, but a great example of what's wrong with us as responsible voters, or at least the responsible voters we should be. The story involved a stack of anti-Hillary Clinton bumper stickers that some people claimed was being distributed by the Republican Committee headquarters in Fairfax, Virginia. This picture of said bumper sticker accompanied several stories. It is a sticker that has nothing to do with Mrs. Clinton's record and is nothing more than a blatant, insulting personal attack. And if you looked closely, you would see the words authorized by Republican Party of Virginia at the very bottom of most of these stickers. The stickers were, according to the story, found by a retired journalist at those headquarters. A spokesperson for the committee denied the state had anything to do with the stickers and called it an amateur effort. Now, to be fair, stickers like these can be made on a home computer by anybody who can hit a few keystrokes. But there are reports of people who went to the Republican office in question and saw stacks of these bumper stickers. The Republican Party, up until this morning, had failed to provide a satisfactory explanation, and in a number of cases had people answering the phone refusing to give their name when asked about the story. But today they said absolutely not, it did not come from us. Okay, stop. Seriously, people, what are we, 8 years old here? What's next, mom jokes? You cannot state with any absolute certainty where these stickers came from. No one can, save for the people in the office they were allegedly found in. And they refused to talk about it until today. If indeed someone in that office had a part in creating these stickers, they should be fired immediately. If it went higher up the chain and someone thought it was snarky and funny, they need to be reprimanded and fired as well. Hey, the media does a good enough job going after the sodden and salacious in every walk of life. Dozens of shows and network programs masquerading as news, dishing dirt because they know how to do it, and they convince themselves that you want it. Hey, don't be dumb enough to fall for it. Don't fall for it. You're smarter than that. There's no reason for the official political groups to wallow in mud with the rumor mongers and frauds. Stay above the fray. Talk about the issues. Bring forth the facts. Bring some respect back to the broken political machine. Makes no difference your personal feelings about Mrs. Clinton. She doesn't deserve this treatment. And the same can be said for every person seeking political office. And that's telling it like it is. Coming up in the next hour, more on the immigration issue, the border issue, and a whole lot more. As Newsmax continues right here on MidPoint, where we question everything.
Do you have questions about Medicare? Are you new to Medicare? Are you wondering about your choices? With over 30 years of Medicare experience, United Healthcare Medicare Solutions can help. Call now to learn more about plans available to you, including AARP Medicare plans, or to get this free Medicare Made Clear answer guide. It was created to help make the different parts of Medicare easier to understand. Medicare has two main parts, Parts A and B, to help cover a lot of your expenses, like hospital care and doctor visits. But they still won't cover all of your costs. United Healthcare has the information you need to help you be better prepared when making Medicare decisions. So call toll-free now or visit us online. Are you looking for something nice and easy, like a single plan that combines Medicare Parts A and B with medical and drug coverage? Well, a Medicare Advantage plan can give you doctor, hospital, and prescription drug coverage all in one plan. Maybe you'd like help paying for your prescriptions. Consider a Part D prescription drug plan. These plans can help reduce the cost of your prescription drugs. Call now to learn more about what United Healthcare offers, like AARP Medicare plans. We'll send you Medicare Made Clear free. One of the many ways United Healthcare can help guide you through your Medicare choices. If you or someone you love is new to Medicare, retiring, losing employers' retiree health benefits, or simply looking for answers to Medicare questions, like what's the difference between Parts A, B, C, and D, call toll-free now or visit us online and download your guide free at answerstomedicare.com/TV. It's full of useful information to help you understand your Medicare choices. And it's only from United Healthcare Medicare Solutions. Call right now or visit us online.
Government agency charged with protecting the American consumer, and in the end seemingly does very little to keep the big corporations in check, despite something of an uproar from the citizens themselves. How the White House manipulates what emanates from their hallowed halls. Learn from the reporter who once asked the president a probing and controversial question about choosing foreigners over Americans. And we go around the dial with a shout to Texas, where the border war is on the front burner and a frustration that no one is listening. Listen up. We question everything for Monday, July 14th, 2014. Also on the dance card, a tour of the floor from the Sunday news programs, where as always some people score points and others leave more than something to be desired. And News Call is once again in the Middle East, covering the war between Israel and Hamas. All this after we get to the latest Newsmax Now with John Bachman.
Thank you for that, Ed. The Internal Revenue Service has decided to award most nonprofit groups tax exemption without ever being screened. IRS Commissioner John Koskian said about 80% of the charitable groups seeking tax exemption will go through a simplified application process. Groups that report total assets lower than $250,000 in income of less than $50,000 can just pay a $400 fee. Prior to the change, the application process involved a 26-page form and required nonprofit-wide supporting documentation and outlines for their intended activities to be considered for that tax-exempt status. The announcement comes amid congressional probes into the IRS's supposed targeting and scrutiny of Tea Party and other conservative groups seeking that 501c4 tax-exempt status in 2013. Now we turn our attention to Israel. The fighting continues against Hamas militants in Gaza. There are also now new reports of Hamas using drones. Earlier today, Israel's military shot down a drone along the southern coastline. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Hamas will not stop until there is no Jewish state.
As far as Hamas is concerned, they couldn't care less if you come with a two-state solution, a three-state solution, or a four-state solution. They want a no-state solution, no Jewish state.
Netanyahu there appearing on CBS's Face the Nation. He refused to discuss any possible details of a ceasefire or give a timeline for Israel's operation in Gaza. Meantime, in Rome, Pope Francis led tens of thousands of people in St. Peter's Square on Sunday in a silent prayer for an end to the warfare in the Middle East. Francis called for insistent prayers for peace in the Holy Land during his appearance to pilgrims and tourists. Meantime, the Church of England is getting some new bishops, possibly. Today, the church voted to allow women to enter its top ranks. The Church of England is part of the Anglican Communion, which has the largest denomination in Britain and presence in more than 160 countries. Some female bishops ahead for the Church of England. More news ahead in 30 minutes. I'm John Bachman. This has been a Newsmax Now update.
Netflix has just responded to Verizon, which yesterday said in a blog post that buffering issues were Netflix's fault. Right now, a Netflix spokesperson tells us, quote, "We'd like to thank Verizon for laying out the issues so nicely. Congestion at the interconnection point is controlled by ISPs like Verizon. When Verizon fails to upgrade those interconnections, consumers get a lousy experience despite paying for more than enough bandwidth to enjoy high-quality Netflix video. That's why Netflix is calling for strong net neutrality that covers the interconnection needed for consumers to get the quality of internet that they pay for."
The Federal Communications Commission is one of those government agencies that at the end of the day is supposed to do what is right for the American consumer. While most times we hear about the FCC when the news strikes on costume malfunctions and 3-second delays that don't always work, there's something much greater that sits on their docket right now. The public is complaining, but is the FCC listening? Let's welcome into MidPoint former FCC Commissioner Harold Futchgott-Roth to make some sense of it all. Harold, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Harold, the big crux of this issue seems to start with this battle that's going on between Netflix and Verizon and the consumers sitting at home right now, myself included among many, who would like to watch a nice Netflix show at night but sit and just watch the wheel spin and spin and spin and spin. So if you could give us a little dig in here as to exactly what this battle is all about and who may actually be in the right here.
Well, I think the first question is, what is the problem? What you've described about consumers having slow internet access just may be a function of the level of service that you have. The issue the Commission is really focused on is whether broadband providers are blocking access to certain sites or discriminating against certain sites. And there's really no evidence that that's happened. So what we're talking about here is primarily a hypothetical problem that some people are concerned may happen in the future, that certain broadband providers may block access or discriminate against certain websites.
Going back again, though, to the Verizon and the Netflix issue, Verizon and Netflix go at it. Netflix says that Verizon doesn't provide this. Verizon says Netflix is actually not paying for enough broadband here, enough space to get their signal out or to basically get the transmission rolling here. Verizon coming back and saying for whatever reason Netflix didn't make arrangements to deliver this massive amount of traffic through connections that can handle it. Netflix knew better. Did they know better, or is this just a new contest going on here as everybody tries to find out where the money lands?
Well, in fact, Verizon and Netflix entered into a contract for Netflix to be able to provide enhanced equipment into the Verizon central offices to provide a better broadband experience for the Verizon customers. That's how those two companies solved that problem. It's a problem, if you will, between different commercial entities. It's not a problem really about how Verizon or any particular broadband company is providing service to their customers.
Isn't this also about, and again, the consumer will sit at home and say, why are we not getting X amount of connectivity through the internet? Because we continue to hear the stories that America is not as well connected as some countries are around the world, and that this is America. We should have better internet connections. The consumer demands it, and a lot of them, like myself and many others, are wondering why.
Well, that's a very good question about broadband speeds. That actually is not the question that's before the FCC today. That's a separate issue, and that's about how do you encourage more broadband investment in the United States. And a lot of people have been looking at that. Some of the outcomes of the current proceeding may inadvertently actually discourage broadband investment by reclassifying broadband as what's called a Title II telecommunications service that would impose not only a lot of regulations, but a lot of taxes on broadband services that ultimately the American consumer would have to pay for.
All right, well, as the consumer is upset at that, you're taking me now to exactly where I was going today, and that is what's in front of the FCC right now and consumer complaints here. This is, again, about net neutrality, which most people still don't understand as the two words. They kind of, all they want is their internet to be as clear as possible. The FCC had a public comment time open for the public to come in and say, comment on it. 647,000 net neutrality comments as the first public commenting round closes here right now. Those consumers do seem to be complaining about what's going on here right now. Matter of fact, here's a public comment to the FCC. We have one of them here. When our internet service providers begin to restrict this, we as Americans suffer. We pay more, yet get less. The FCC needs to bring true net neutrality with the interests of the American public in mind. Is the FCC doing everything it can to provide that sort of service the American consumer is looking for?
Well, I think there are a lot of well-intentioned consumers out there who may not entirely understand what this proceeding is about. This proceeding is not about figuring out how to get faster broadband to the American public. The network neutrality is entirely about trying to conjure up interpretations of communications law to give the FCC more authority to regulate. More authority for the FCC to regulate will not lead companies to invest more in broadband infrastructure. So if you want to have faster broadband in America, if you want to have greater capacity, it certainly isn't clear to me or to a lot of other folks how more regulation on network neutrality would possibly lead in that direction. it almost certainly would lead in the opposite direction.
Give us an idea of what that opposite direction would be if indeed there was more government interference, as some people see it, more government regulation.
Well, providing broadband infrastructure is very expensive. Each year in the United States, U.S. telecommunications companies invest tens of billions of dollars in providing more broadband infrastructure, both for wireless and wireline fiber networks that go throughout the United States. Part of the reason they invest is based on their projections of what their future revenue will look like, their future business model. If there's more regulation, the more regulation is almost certainly going to mean less cash flows for those companies, and therefore they're going to make fewer investments. That's generally how it works.
Let me ask you a question here and switch to something else, because certainly the FCC, as I said, is involved in a number of different issues here and a number of things that the consumer is most interested about. There is the current acquisition of Comcast, Time Warner Cable, Comcast going after Time Warner. Dish Network is out there right now urging the FCC to reject this whole acquisition here, saying it would harm competition. Let me again take it down to the consumer side and again hopefully try to help them understand a little bit. The consumers always seem to be wondering why the FCC does not take greater care, at least in their mind, to make sure that these acquisitions do indeed drive down prices, make it more affordable for the American consumer. Yet there seems to be a thinking process that when these acquisitions go through, the prices will always go up. What is the FCC doing, and what can it do to at least try and keep the costs down? Because that's the one thing that the consumers are always focused on.
Well, first of all, every merger of any size in the United States gets reviewed by one of two federal agencies, the Antitrust Division of the Justice Department or the Federal Trade Commission. Those are the two federal agencies responsible for reviewing mergers in the United States. Those are the two federal agencies responsible for ensuring that mergers do not result in greater market power for the merging parties to harm consumers. They take their job very seriously. Thousands of Americans work at those agencies. They're professionals. They do a great job. The Federal Communications Commission actually does not have any statutory authority to review mergers, and yet it has done that over the past 20 years or so. I, for one, have consistently held that the FCC does not have the authority to review those mergers. When it does review those mergers, I think outside of its statutory authority, it has not done so in a manner that has been consistent with trying to figure out what's going to promote the consumer interest. So yes, there is this major merger that's before the Antitrust Division of the Justice Department of the United States, the Comcast-Time Warner merger. It is also being reviewed, I think, completely outside of statutory authority by the Federal Communications Commission.
Why then does it still go to the FCC then? Because it seems as if they shouldn't even be involved in the process.
Every company of any size in the United States holds FCC licenses or FCC permissions. As part of any merger of any company, they will come to the FCC to get license transferred. When two banks merge, they come to the FCC to get license transferred. When two oil companies merge, they come to the FCC to get license transferred. The FCC doesn't review those intensively. Instead, they just automatically pass the licenses along. It's much like when two trucking companies merge, they go to the Department of Motor Vehicles to get their truck titles transferred. That's how the FCC should operate. But what they do is when two major communications companies merge, they decide they're going to look at that really carefully. And that's what the Commission has been doing for 20 years. I think it's wrong.
A discussion for another time, certainly, because it seems as if the FCC sometimes doesn't need to be involved in certain areas where the consumer would be always complaining about. Harold Furchtgott-Roth, former FCC Commissioner, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It is, if you look at these issues and you look at them back and forth, and we look at Verizon fighting against Netflix, and we look at the amount of internet access that you have. I mean, it, quite frankly, is very confusing to the American consumer. Look, let's make it very simple here. What the consumer wants, what you and I want, is to be able to turn on the computer, get your internet, get it at its speed, pay for it, and make sure that the money that you're paying for it is actually being used to give you what you are supposedly be able to get. Unfortunately, when it comes down to so many people being involved and the FCC now being involved, the fights go on between these two major companies and also these large acquisitions to see if they will make any difference in the consumer paying a little less money. We'll take a break, come back on the other side, because this is MidPoint, where every day we question everything.
Do you sleep too hot while your partner sleeps too cool? Do you struggle to sleep at the right temperature? Now Sleep Number has a solution that's as revolutionary as its beds. Introducing the Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer. The amazing Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer allows both of you to select your ideal temperature for better sleep. The Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer works with any mattress brand. It features active air technology, which evenly distributes air to heat and cool each side to the temperature you prefer for head-to-toe comfort. Call or click now for this free $50 savings card and catalog.
My husband and I both prefer different temperatures. He likes to have his side of the bed a little bit warmer, and I like to have mine a little bit cooler, and we are finally sleeping better together.
After sleeping on a dual temp layer, I find that I have such a restful night's sleep that when I wake up in the morning, I am energized and I'm ready for the day.
All night long, you can each enjoy sleep at a temperature that perfectly matches what your body needs for comfortable sleep, so you can sleep better together. In a research study, 75% reported poor sleep because of their sleeping temperature. That's because your body's temperature naturally fluctuates at night. But with the Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer, you can sleep comfortably warm or cool. And because the revolutionary Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer helps solve an important sleep problem, it was selected as a very innovative product by Good Housekeeping. Remember, the Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer can be added to any mattress brand, so everyone can enjoy sleeping better at the perfect temperature. Call or click now.
Call 1-800-317-5283 or click now for a free $50 savings card and catalog with price list. For your peace of mind, the Sleep Number Dual Temp Layer comes with a 100-night in-home trial. Call 1-800-317-5283 or click now. That's 1-800-317-5283 for your free $50 savings card and catalog.
Now on Newsmax TV. Paul Ryan is a GOP rising star. Will he run for president in 2016? Watch the Malsberg Show on Newsmax TV and find out. Go now to Newsmax TV.
If House Republicans are really concerned about me taking too many executive actions, the best solution to that is passing bills. Pass a bill. Solve a problem. Don't just say no on something that everybody agrees needs to be done.
One does not have to be a Rhodes Scholar or a student of political science to know that every single time we see and hear a press conference coming from the White House, it will be chock full of furtive glances, admonitions of anyone in the press corps daring to ask a pointed question, and spinning the likes of which you won't even see at a good workout center when all the stand-up bikes are rolling at once. Let's welcome into MidPoint the man who had the audacity to ask the President of the United States, why do you favor foreigners over Americans? White House correspondent for the Daily Caller, Neil Monroe, joins us today. Neil, thanks so much for being with us.
Delighted to be here.
Neil, that was 2 years ago, and that still is what you carry with you every day. Is there still those in the White House press corps who continue to remind you of it? Plus, I would imagine the president and the press secretaries always remind you?
Yes, it does come up in conversation occasionally. But I often remember it because I still want to get an answer. I still want to get an answer from Mr. Black because he's doing it again. This current onrush over the border, the president seems to be waving a green light, green lantern, green flag, and have a whole bunch of cheerleaders wearing green, bringing them on in, and everybody who comes across the border creates more competition for jobs, drives down wages, and brings resources away from Americans who need it too.
But, Neil, they certainly are not going to answer your question, because I would imagine that they think it is beneath them to answer it, and probably it's not something that they want to get involved in here. But is it not fair to say that this administration is certainly setting new standards for A, spin, and B, arrogance when it comes to not only the immigration crisis, but certainly so much more?
Yeah, that seems reasonable. I mean, yeah, it's hard to say. The Bushes, Clinton, Reagan could have been like this, but the main thing really is that most of the reporters and the editors just don't have they just don't push very hard. There's never, in a newsroom, I'm just standing beside the White House newsroom, there's rarely any heat or anger or passion to force out an answer from the press secretaries, who can stand there and spin and just duck and dodge, dive and duck, and they get away with it because the reporters fundamentally aren't chasing very hard. And individual reporters ask great questions. Individual reporters can be very dogged, like John Carl, Major Garrett, Jake Tapper, but he's gone on. But remember, it's their editors and their camera crews and their bosses further up the food chain that just they put a whole damper on this. They just make it hard for reporters to challenge the new press secretary or the old press secretary, even when they say the most preposterous stuff. And then, often enough, the press secretary will make jokes, and reporters will laugh, even as they're being bamboozled. In a way, it's a little embarrassing.
Is it not fair to say, though, that when you become a part of the White House press corps, as it is much like anything else, you're expected to ask certain questions, not step over a certain line, and if you do, you don't become a member of the White House press corps anymore. You're looking for work, your bosses are not happy, and it all begins again with somebody new that walks into the door.
Yeah, there's all sorts of pressures. I mean, here's one. There's lots of, the front row in the White House press room consists of the wire guys and the TV guys. Well, what the TV guys want is nice, clean video of their guy challenging the press secretary in a reasonably civilized, decorous way, right? So if someone yells out from the back, or laughs, or if there's hooting from the reporters, well, it spoils the video. And so the TV guys have an incentive to have a nice, calm newsroom activities. As for then there's the guys in front who have special privileges because the New York Times, Washington Post, they have access and influence, major TV networks. They can go behind closed doors and squeeze out a comment or two, an extra piece of information. And also, no one wants to rock the boat. No one wants to tick off the press secretary, because then it's harder for them to get prestigious interviews. So, for example, if one TV guy is thinking, I got a great question, but it'll really tick him off, and he remembers his boss wants him to get an interview with Valerie Jarrett on Women's Day or something like this. Well, if he ticks off Ernest, he doesn't get the Jarrett interview, and then his boss is ticked off. So there's a whole series of incentives, subtle and obvious, that make it harder for reporters to press, to jump on Ernest. I mean, if you go to European capitals, where perhaps because there's less cameras in these briefing rooms, the reporters can be wilder and more aggressive. In Russia, Putin holds a sort of massive multi-hour press conference every year, and the reporters get to ask more aggressive questions. Here, it's just almost like Sunday school.
Let's talk about what's been happening with the immigration crisis right now, because certainly when it comes to spin, the administration is putting a marvelous spin on this. And again, we go back to last week when the president did not go to Texas, the calls for him to at least go there, to at least be seen as caring about what's happening in Texas right now. What is the general consensus of the people there covering the story and those on the ground when it comes to the president's concern for this? Because we are continuing to hear, and I'm even hearing from some reporters, that they get the feeling that when they ask a very pointed question about the immigration crisis, it is as if the question was never asked whatsoever. It's glossed over, it's like it never existed, and they have never seen this kind of spin here from an administration that many people see as just trying to hide whenever they can.
Well, that's basically true. It's complicated by the fact that immigration law is very complex, and reporters know very little about it, and by the fact the administration is hiding most of the information. And the administration is good and clever. I mean, skilled and clever. So, for example, right from the beginning, they were talking about children. Jay Johnson, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, said, I went down to the border and I met a child who was only age 10. She said her parents were dead. Oh, I resolved to do something about this terrible thing. Okay, so that sets the whole tone of the conversation about children, but it's not really about children. The vast majority of the children arriving, supposedly unaccompanied by the border, are in fact being delivered to federal agencies by smugglers on behalf of their parents living in Baltimore and Los Angeles and New York, etc. In effect, they're using the feds to complete the delivery of their child from the smuggler's arms into their arms. And then the influx includes a huge number of young adults, for example, 18, 19, 20-year-old young men insisting I'm 17. And then there's a whole pile of adults in a category that the administration doesn't want to talk about. They say, well, there are family groups coming over. But they're loath to say how many adults in the family groups, how many family groups, how many kids, etc. So they really want to focus it on children. And then once they focus it on children, they can then focus the conversation on a complex 2008 law, at least one little feature of the law, which is actually really about trafficking. The president has plenty of authority to say, I'm going to stop this right now. I don't need extra money. I'm just going to tell my guys to do this differently, interpret that regulation differently, change my management rules, and it can stop. It's just an easy way. So, for example, the unaccompanied children that are delivered to them by the smugglers, they normally process, send off to the Department of Homeland of Health and Human Services, and then, believe it or not, they transport the kids up to where the parents are living and hand them over to the parents. The parents are illegal, mostly. It would be very easy for the feds to say, it's wonderful to have the family together. Let's have the family together in Guatemala or Honduras, not in Boston. But the administration refuses to deport any of the parents. And so, in effect, the administration is creating an incentive for the parents to bring their kids up, and it's not taking an obvious tactic to end the movement. All they have to do is announce from now on, we're going to hold the kids, and we're not going to give them over to anyone who is here illegally. And that would have a big impact on the northward movement of the young men and women, girls and boys. But they're not going to do that because they want, as far as I can see, the president favors the arrival of the Honduran, Guatemalan, and El Salvadorian people into the United States to compete for jobs against African Americans, Latinos, and whites, unskilled and young, etc. It's a strange life, but that's what the president seems to be doing.
Neil, I got about 30 seconds left. Is that the last thing you said right there? Is that the answer to the question that you asked the president 2 years ago? Why do you prefer foreigners over Americans?
I mean, I asked that question because based on the assumption that he is preferring them. In the end, you can't say psychologically. But do you know of any evidence where he says, I favor Americans over others? I have not seen it. I've not seen the evidence. And, that's a strange and unique thing for an American president.
It is an unfortunate thing, as many people would indicate as well, for an American president. Neil, it is always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll do it again.
Thank you very much. Bye.
All right, Neil Monroe from the Daily Caller. And a couple of things here as far as this almost $4 billion that the president is asking for. Keep in mind, almost $2 billion of it for the Department of Health and Human Services for the care of unaccompanied children, including shelter and medical care. It is something that the critics are asking. Why do you need shelter if indeed you are planning on sending them back home instead of keeping them here? The debate rolls on. Next up, shining and shaming on the Sunday talk shows, the best and not always the brightest, when we continue right here on MidPoint.
Smile. No matter how well you provide for your family today, if you don't have life insurance, their future may be at risk. Think about what would happen if you were gone. Would they struggle to pay the bills and face an uncertain future? They don't have to. You can help guarantee those you love $200,000, $500,000, $750,000 or more with life insurance through AIG Direct. We'll help you get more for your money, up to 70% more. Just look, less than $14 a month buys a 40-year-old man a $250,000 term life policy. That's up to 3 times what you can get from other companies for the same price. No wonder millions of people rely on AIG companies. The call is free, the quote is free, and there's no obligation. Make the future more secure for those you love. Call now so you can sleep better at night.
For a free quote, call 1-800-558-5246 or visit AIGdirect.com.
I'm at St. Jude because I had a cancer inside of me. They diagnosed me with a brain tumor. You have to be strong and don't give up. Attitude is everything. You have to fight.
Imagine your doctor tells you your child has cancer with only months to live. Where would you go? What would you do? Who would you turn to? Fortunately, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital is fighting every day to save children's lives. And with a gift of just $19 a month, you can join the fight.
This is my kid that they're giving back to me. I am so grateful.
At St. Jude, no family ever receives a bill. In fact, no family pays St. Jude for anything. That's why your gift of $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, is so important.
When I thought that I might lose my son, they gave me hope. You are not only saving a child's life, you're breathing life back into that family.
If I hadn't have come here, I wouldn't have my son.
St. Jude's life-saving research and treatment is shared freely with hospitals around the world.
St. Jude gives you hope and happiness. They're helping us live. Maybe in the future, kids won't have to go through this. We'll find a cure and it'll all be over.
Please, call and become a St. Jude Partner in Hope right now.
And I'm Miranda Kahn here now with another Newsmax Now update. If you've been following our coverage of the crisis of the U.S.-Mexican border, you already know that President Obama has asked Congress for nearly $4 billion. The proposal includes a $45 million request to hire additional immigration judges. And according to the latest report today by the Department of Justice, immigration courts currently face a backlog of more than 360,000 cases. Of course, money for judges isn't the only fiscal problem on the border. Texas Congressman Ted Poe was on America's Forum earlier today and explained why getting the National Guard on the border has its challenges.
The obligation of the federal government to pay the National Guard, but the governors can call them out. I think maybe reluctance on Governor Perry is there's no funds in Texas to pay for the National Guard.
But what has many people concerned is where the majority of the money President Obama is requesting will go.
It's part of the president's policy. He is missing the point about this entire problem on the border. His $4 billion, J.D., is really to take care of those people that have crossed indefinitely.
And of the $3.7 billion requested, nearly 50% would go to social services, including housing for detained illegals. And Citigroup says it will pay $7 billion to the Justice Department in an effort to settle allegations of mortgage fraud. The toxic loan Citigroup has admitted to its contribution to the housing market crash and financial crisis of 2008. Citigroup CEO says he hopes today's settlement will allow his company to focus on the future, not the past.
All right, the Sunday news show's dominated this week by the war in Israel and the war on America's borders, as you might admit. First of all, let's go to CNN State of the Union with Candy Crowley. Senator John McCain was there. Immigration comes up right away as something that has been right at the forefront of his thinking for a long time now. And he is once again discussing what needs to be done because there are more than 50,000 immigrant children in limbo. The border is not secure, and Senator McCain is still asking for answers.
We cannot have an unending stream of children, whether it be from Central America or any place else, to come into our country with all of the strains and pressures that is put on our capabilities. It's not acceptable. Every nation has the requirement to secure its borders. Our borders are not secure, no matter what they say.
We move now to what is happening in Israel, the battle between Israel and the Hamas organization, the Palestinians. Let's move next to CBS and face the nation. The top Palestinian diplomat to the United States. Escalating violence between Israel and the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. At last word, there were almost 200 deaths in the latest round of battling between these two entities. And in the opinion of the diplomat himself, the root cause is not what many people would point to, and that is Hamas being a terrorist organization. He goes back to the fact that it is the root cause of Israel's occupation.
I think the root cause of all the violence that we have witnessed over the last 48 years since Israel occupied the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem in 1967 is due to the continued Israeli military occupation. Yesterday, in an attack on a building to take out supposedly, allegedly, one militant, they killed 18 people in the process. Tell me what law, what international law allows a country, a superiorly militarily country, to target a civilian population in order to take out targets. Gaza is very densely populated. Now, there may be instances that there has been rockets fired from within buildings, but does this justify that you kill 170 people and wound 12 in less than a week? I don't think so.
And an exclusive interview with NBC's David Gregory in Vienna. Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif called for an immediate end to Israel's airstrikes on Gaza.
We call for an immediate end to all these activities.
You condemn Hamas?
We do not condemn people who are defending themselves. We believe that actions that are putting civilians in jeopardy in Gaza, that have placed restrictions on civilians to get access to medicine, to food, have tried to starve the civilians in Gaza, need to be vehemently condemned by the international community. The United States and the rest of the members of the Security Council have a moral and legal responsibility to put an end to this, and we regret the fact that they haven't taken any action in order to address it.
And now another Medical Minute with Dr. Chauncey Crandall.
Heart disease is the biggest killer disease in America, and this doesn't surprise me. We are addicted to starches, sugars, fatty meats, and salt. People who live in countries with little heart disease eat very differently. One way some people stay heart healthy is by following what is known as the caveman or Stonehenge diet, so named because of its similarity to the way our prehistoric ancestors ate. People who follow this type of diet live off local fruits and root vegetables and get their protein mostly from fish and wild game they shoot themselves. Now, since most of us don't hunt or fish for all our protein, here are some simple tips on how you can start to eat like a caveman, modern day style. First, fill up on fruits and vegetables. Eat them first and you'll be less hungry. Feast on fish, which is rich in nutrients but not in calories. Choose fatty fish like mackerel, herring, sardines, and salmon, which are rich in heart-healthy omega-3 fatty acids. Get out and go for a walk. Remember, our ancestors were hunters and gatherers, so they didn't spend their time sitting in front of a TV or computer all day. If you live more like a caveman or a cave woman, your heart will love you for it. I'm Dr. Chauncey Crandall, and thank you for watching this Heart Health Minute. Remember, it's never too late to prevent or reverse heart disease. Right now, I invite you to discover your own risk for heart disease or even a heart attack by taking my quick, free online quiz at www.simplehearttest.com.
Hey, when Bob got into the accident, I was terrified. His injuries were so severe, but once we knew he was going to be okay, what then?
I couldn't go back to work for a long time, and we got way behind on our bills.
We had hired an attorney, but when our case kept dragging on, we didn't know how we were going to get by. Thankfully, our attorney knew about Oasis Legal Finance.
Oasis looked at our case and got us the money the very next day.
What a relief it was. We didn't have to wait until our case settled, and the money from Oasis helped us when we needed it most.
At first, I wasn't so sure. What if we lost the case? How would we be able to pay back Oasis? But then I found out if we did lose, we wouldn't have to pay them back, so there was no risk in doing it. No risk.
If you were involved in an accident and hired an attorney to fight for the compensation you deserve but need money now before your case settles, then call Oasis today. Oasis has given millions of dollars to people like you who need money fast while waiting for their case to settle. There's no risk, so call now.
I was hurt badly in a car accident just after my wife gave birth. We were counting on the cash from my lawsuit to get caught up, but the case took forever.
Honestly, we didn't know what we were going to do. Then we saw an Oasis TV commercial and called. We were approved and got money from Oasis the next day.
Not in a week, the very next day.
I was hurt at work and filed a workers' comp claim. I called Oasis and they gave me the cash I needed. Unfortunately, I ended up losing my case, but Oasis let us keep the money. They kept their promise and we didn't need to pay them back.
There are no out-of-pocket costs and no payments until your case is settled. If you lose your case, you don't have to repay Oasis. There's no risk. Call Oasis now to see how much money you can get before your case settles.
Call now, 1-800-562-8184. 1-800-562-8184. 1-800-562-8184.
We, the people of the United States,
in order to form a more perfect union,
establish justice,
ensure domestic tranquility,
provide for the common defense,
promote the general welfare,
and secure the blessings of liberty
to ourselves and our posterity.
Do ordain and establish this Constitution
for the United States of America.
Policy on the border certainly is encouraging this behavior. If I believe, and I'm in El Salvador or somewhere else, that I can pay a criminal gang, think of that, to take my children through some very dangerous circumstances to get to the United States, and then they're going to open up with loving arms and keep those kids, you're encouraging that behavior. And right now,
But that goes back to the 2008 law, right?
No, I disagree. I mean, even Dianne Feinstein, Democrat from California, said that's just not right. That's a wrong interpretation of his authority to get those kids back home safely and humanely. But again, think about it. Now all our command energy is on this, so all the borders folks are trying to figure this out and how to put them around the rest of the country. That time, that energy is better spent trying to get them back home.
There are those who insist what the Obama administration is doing with the current border crisis is stuffing their current and future voter rolls with dedicated Hispanics. Yet what of those Hispanic Americans who are proud American citizens and wonder about a double standard? That and a whole lot more coming up right here. Everything you might want to ask, because we welcome into MidPoint from Around the Dial, our segment every week where we look for some of the best talkers around America from KSEF Radio in Houston and the Blaze Radio Network. Also Executive Director of the Conservative Hispanic Society, Chris Salcido, joins us today. Chris, thanks for being with us.
Ed, my pleasure, sir.
Chris, there's a good question to start on, because I've often heard a lot of people talking about this, but it doesn't get a tremendous amount of attention in the media. Hispanic Americans who are here, hardworking people, citizens of the United States, who look at what's happening coming across the border, and there are people who are flat out angry about this because they see a double standard here. What are you gaining then from the people in Houston, Dallas, and in Texas where you're located?
Well, a lot of frustration, and it's not only confined here, even though this is ground zero where it's all happening here. We are flying, we are shipping these illegal immigrants who come into the country to points like San Diego or Tucson to process them. I saw an interesting discussion on CNN over the week, and I think this is pretty indicative of the mindset of the press anyway. It was Don Lemon interviewing Paul Rodriguez, the comedian, you know, and Mr. Rodriguez took a pretty hardline stance saying, you know, we have to be compassionate, but you can't roll out the welcome mat and welcome illegal immigration. And Don Lemon said, gee, what a surprise. A lot of people around the country might feel a bit surprised to hear an immigrant take that stance. And it's a complete, there's no connection there, because the assumption is by a lot of the folks in the mainstream press and a lot of folks in government that those who migrate legally into the country somehow have a relationship or an affinity to those who come in illegally, and it's just not the case. And especially with citizens of these United States who happen to be of Latino descent, there is no correlation between those who are coming across illegally and those who are citizens. This might shock some of our liberal friends out there, but no, we Latinos like the rule of law as well. We adhere to the Constitution, have a reverence for the Constitution. So this whole assumption that illegal activity is somehow, applauded and thumbs up by the Latino community. It's a Democrat assumption, it's a liberal assumption, and it ought to be pushed back against.
How angry does that make members of the Latino community? Because it does indeed seem that it is a simple, straight line that is being made. These are Latinos who are coming across the border, and if you're Latino here in America, you must fall on the side of wanting them to stay here, to care for them, to break the laws of the United States.
See, and that again, first off, educated Latinos and a lot of people who are engaged on the Latino side of this issue understand that it's not just Hispanics who are coming across that border or Latinos coming across that border. We know they're coming from all over the world, and it's not a Latino thing, it's a rule of law thing if you start to boil it down. And a lot of Hispanics who are legally in this country or are citizens of the United States, they want what everybody else wants: adherence to the rule of law. Now, don't get me wrong, you're going to have those what I call loudmouth leftist Latinos who, they populate the Latino culture the way they populate every other culture. Those extremist left-wingers who, we have one in Washington, D.C. right now who occupies the Oval Office, who doesn't believe in the rule of law, who believes in stepping outside of the confines placed on his office or on those elected leaders around the country, stepping out of those on a regular basis. But by and large, the Latino community is law-abiding, those who are legally here in the United States. It's a complete fallacy, and it's a complete made-up stance that the mainstream press has tried to impose on the Latino community. And I have been pushing back on this. Just because you happen to be Hispanic does not mean you advocate lawlessness.
All right, now answer this then, because I alluded to this a little bit as I introduced you here. There is a thinking process here by some that the Democrats are basically allowing across what they consider to be future voters. They are going to make current Hispanic voters happy. They are then stuffing their rolls with current voters who will say, simply because of what the administration has done here, they will be able to garner the Hispanic vote very easily. They will keep it in their pocket, and there's no way that it would ever walk over to the Republican side. What do you think?
It's a deficit. I think it's the Democrats are just being Democrats. They are playing division politics. They always do this. I think the deficiency is on the side of the GOP to look for folks who can talk intelligently about this, like you and I are talking about it right now, and say this whole idea that Hispanics are into lawlessness, that we can reject that wholeheartedly. The vast majority of Hispanics are law-abiding. If the GOP makes intelligent cases to individuals in the Hispanic community that it's not anti-Hispanic the way the Democrats characterize it, and the Democrats have been able to define the parameters of this discussion because the GOP just doesn't seem to know how to talk about these kind of things. If we can get out of that rut, I think the GOP will make significant inroads in with the Latino community because, again, Hispanics like jobs, Hispanics like prosperity, just like everybody else does in America, and they despise lawlessness.
I got about 45 seconds left. You're talking a lot about the war on women along the network, aren't you, these days?
Yes, Mike Dickinson. He is trying to replace Eric Cantor. He's a Democrat. He has put a bounty of $100,000 for illicit photos of a little girl here in the state of Texas. She's 19 years old. She's a hunter. Her name is Kendall Jones. This guy has put out a $100,000 reward for videos or pictures of this woman with no clothes on. He has put her safety in danger. And the Democrats, I called the DNC, I called Sheila Jackson Lee's office down in Houston, not one peep out of these people. If you look at Weiner, you look at Filner, and now you look at this cat, the real war on women is on the Democrat side of the aisle.
It is an interesting topic. We're going to have to dig into this a little more often. We're all out of time. See what happens? It's always like in talk radio, right, Chris? At the last minute when you have a break coming up, there's something that we could do 20 minutes on right there as soon as we figure it all out. We'll definitely have you on again. We'll do it again. Chris Salcido, thank you so much for joining us.
See you, Ed. Thank you.
All right, KSEV in Houston, also the Blaze Radio Network, and what he talks about with regard to Hispanic Americans, the Hispanic vote, and the people who are here. I'm hearing that from a lot of my friends, Hispanic Americans, who say, just because we're Hispanic doesn't mean that we are in favor of breaking the law. It is certainly something that the networks seem to perpetuate from time to time. Stick around. This is MidPoint, where every day we question everything.
I've always seen No No on TV, and I always wondered if it worked. And it's definitely, I can see what everybody talks about now.
It's not a razor. It's not a laser. It's No-No from Radiancy, the #1 hair removal system in the world.
It's absolutely no pain.
Can't believe the difference, Al. It's almost hair-free.
No-No gives you no hair with no pain.
Well, I saw it on TV and they said it was painless, right? I didn't really believe it, but now that I'm trying it, it feels completely painless.
And now, No-No is better than ever. Introducing the new No-No Pro. It's up to 35% more powerful. Imagine never having to shave again.
I like a close shave. Absolutely. And this is better than that. I mean, it's gone.
No more facial hair. No more embarrassment.
I've always been self-conscious of my hairline, so putting my hair back, this will be perfect for me.
And for that man in your life, there's No-No for him too.
It looks like just like you've got a fresh wax, but like you don't have to go through all the pain.
Call now and we'll send you the cordless No-No Pro in your choice of colors. Featuring an LCD display, it comes with up to 5 treatment levels. Plus, we'll include everything you need to get rid of your unwanted hair. A set of Thermicon tips, specially designed for your face and body. A buffer pad to exfoliate and polish your skin. Plus, act now and we'll send you the No-No travel case as a free gift. And get this, you can try No-No risk-free for not 30 days, but 60 days with our triple guarantee. If you are not 100% satisfied, return it and we'll refund the purchase price, refund the shipping, and even pay the return postage. Try No-No risk-free today.
I need to get myself one of these right now.
Absolutely.
For your 60-day trial, go to nonopro.com or call 1-800-934-5335. That's 1-800-934-5335.
Are you prepared for the coming geopolitical storm that will radically alter the military, political, and economic landscape as we know it? Events unfolding within the next 6 months will have consequences for all Americans and inescapable worldwide economic impact. Langley Intelligence Group Network. LIGNET is a globally recognized intelligence resource with a senior advisory board consisting of former CIA analysts, national security officers, and presidential advisors. LIGNET's seasoned intelligence and security experts have now issued a global forecast that is must-reading for those who need to be in the know. This in-depth analysis arms individuals, investors, corporations, and governments with the tools to position themselves for success in this rapidly changing environment. Sign up now and access the LIGNET Global Forecast for just $1. Receive 30 days of full access to LIGNET's penetrating global analysis. Join LIGNET today. Go to www.lignet.com/global.
When you live a busy life like I do, every moment counts. When I was diagnosed with asthma, I was afraid my career might skip a beat. Nearly 25 million Americans suffer from asthma. We're not alone.
Great session, Kristen.
Thank you. That's why I count on my rescue inhaler with a dose counter. It keeps track of the number of doses I have left, so I can count on my asthma medication when I need it the most. Keep your own count. Visit knowyourcount.com to learn more.
When some people struggle with their mortgage payments, they become frozen, petrified. Not knowing what to do, they do nothing. But the people who take action are far more likely to get the most positive outcome. Making home affordable is a free government program. Call now to talk one-on-one with a housing expert about the options that are right for you. Real help, real answers, right now.
There are some who call it a conflict, others a campaign, but to those on the ground it is simply a war. More than 1,000 rockets have been launched at Israel, more than 1,300 airstrikes in return, and the death count is beginning to inch toward the 200 mark. Today's edition of News Call returns to the Middle East, where there would appear to be no pullback in the level of violence.
For some, the violence has become unbearable. Today, the U.S. evacuated its citizens with the help of the UN. Making the journey was Palestinian-American Akram Mushtaha and his family from Houston, Texas. They were here visiting relatives, but now too afraid to stay.
Do you feel bad about leaving Gaza right now?
Very. I'm leaving, just my body is leaving. My heart is staying back home. my heart staying in Gaza.
It was in the dead of night when several dozen Navy commandos, Israel's equivalent of the Navy SEALs, approached the Gaza shore from the Mediterranean Sea in small boats, surveillance planes and attack helicopters providing cover. The commandos destroyed a number of Hamas long-range rockets and launchers that have been targeting Israel's major cities. But Hamas militants spotted the team and opened fire.
There was a huge engagement and we took out the capabilities and the terrorists.
A group of pro-Israeli demonstrators were holding a peaceful rally when several men in a truck waving Palestinian flags stopped in the middle of Wilshire Boulevard and then started swinging their flag sticks at the pro-Israeli protesters, hitting people. One of the flag sticks, I'm told, broke. A flag went on the ground, and then a melee of sorts ensued. In the moments following that, the men with flags jumped back in their truck and took off, according to that witness. That is when Homeland Security officers approached them. Then the witness said a Homeland Security officer fired one shot at the truck. It did not hit anybody, and at least one person was arrested.
Shortly before, a missile smashed into this house in Jabalia, northern Gaza. Shrapnel ripped a massive hole in the head of 4-year-old Sahar Abu Namus. At the hospital, his father hysterical with grief. Another father comforts a boy who witnessed Sahar's death. Some still looking fearfully toward the sky.
The Israeli military continue their strikes in Gaza in the worst flare-up in Israeli-Palestinian violence in almost 2 years. Israeli aircraft and naval gunboats attacked 204 targets in the Strip overnight, the army said. Palestinian health officials said at least 20 people were wounded. Palestinian militants fired more than 20 rockets into Israel, the Israeli military added, but no casualties were reported.
The Israeli military is pounding the Gaza Strip for the 5th night in a row. With more than 1,000 airstrikes, Israel says it's destroyed terrorist weaponry and command centers. But in reality, many of the targets are the homes of militants, and civilians have become collateral damage. Officials here say 2 disabled girls were killed when this care home was hit by an airstrike early this morning. Scores of civilian deaths have stoked Palestinian anger and frustration. And on the border, Israel is massing its troops. There's no ground invasion yet, but the Israeli government won't rule it out.
For much of the night, the wounded and the dead were brought into Shifa Hospital. It was the most sustained bombing so far. Gaza was pounded. For Israel, this is self-defense with American support. But as more civilians die, the pressure for a ceasefire is growing.
Some numbers that we have coming in right now, and they're not exactly what you would consider to be very good, because here's the numbers. Israel said its forces have struck 1,470 terror targets across Gaza, including 770 concealed rocket launchers. It is not necessarily the amount of terror targets that are being struck, because obviously between Hamas and Israel, there are bullets and missiles flying back and forth constantly. The one thing that is very disconcerting in all this is thus far, and this is according to reports now, 70% of the fatalities are civilians. We'll continue to follow this story. So what can be done to shut down the missiles flying in the Middle East and at the very least bring Israel and Hamas to the stage of talking instead of fighting? That and more coming up next hour right here on MidPoint, where every day we question everything.
Meet Mary. She loves to shop online with her debit card. And so does Bill, an identity thief who stole Mary's identity, took over her bank accounts, and stole her hard-earned money. Unfortunately, millions of Americans just like you learn all it may take is a little misplaced information to wreak havoc on your life. This is identity theft, and no one helps stop it better than LifeLock. LifeLock offers the most comprehensive identity theft protection available. If Mary had LifeLock's bank account alerts, she may have been notified before it was too late. LifeLock's credit notification service is on the job 24/7. As soon as they detect a threat to your identity within their network, they will alert you, protecting you before the damage is done. LifeLock has the most comprehensive identity theft protection available, guarding your social security number, your money, your credit, even the equity in your home.
My years as a prosecutor taught me that we all need to protect ourselves from crime. In today's world, that includes identity theft. It's a serious problem. We all have to protect ourselves.
While identity theft can't be completely stopped, no one works harder to protect you than LifeLock. You even get a $1 million service guarantee. That's security no one can beat. You have so much to protect and nothing to lose. When you call LifeLock right now and get 60 days of identity theft protection risk-free. That's right, 60 days risk-free. Use promo code NOTME. Order now and get this document shredder to keep sensitive documents out of the wrong hands. A $29 value, free. Don't wait until you become the next victim. Call 1-800-918-3128 for 60 days of LifeLock identity theft protection risk-free and get a document shredder free. Use promo code NOTME. Call 1-800-918-3128 now.
What is happening at the American border is not affecting only those communities in the Southwest. The ripple effect is tearing across this country, with lawmakers feeling helpless to make a difference. We'll talk with Tennessee Republican challenger Joe Carr. Israel has promised to press the fight against Hamas, but the world is wondering if the effort is too broad, with too many innocents dying in the crossfire. And we go inside the Beltway to unearth what rumbles out of Washington. All this and much more as we question everything for July 14th, 2014. Add to what's happening in the Middle East, some factions calling for the United States to get involved, others telling John Kerry to stay away and mind our own business. We'll put some truth to the matter right after John Bachman deals out this edition of Newsmax Now.
Thank you, Ed. The U.S. government continues to build its case against the alleged mastermind behind the 2012 Libyan attacks on the U.S. Embassy and diplomatic compound in Benghazi. Earlier today, Attorney General Eric Holder said the U.S. is confident that the case that they've built against Khatallah will be successful.
I think the people in the FBI, the people in our military, people in the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Washington, D.C. have done a great job in a very difficult set of circumstances and in a very difficult environment to put together a strong case.
Abu Khatallah is scheduled to appear back in federal court in September. Meantime, Libya continues its downward spiral. Rival militia groups clashed at the country's international airport in Tripoli yesterday. According to the Associated Press, 6 people were killed. Some 25 others were injured when groups battled for control of the airport. As you can see right there, planes were left riddled with bullet holes and cars were set ablaze during the gunfight. Also yesterday, the Israeli military briefly deployed ground troops inside the Gaza Strip for the first time since the beginning of Operation Protective Edge a week or so ago. Commando forces clashed with Palestinian militants in a battle that left 4 Israeli soldiers injured. The Israeli military says they were involved in a raid against a rocket launching site. Military officials are also saying today they've shot down a Hamas-controlled drone using U.S.-supplied Patriot defense missiles. According to IDF forces, Hamas continues to launch more than 100 rocket attacks every single day. I'm John Bachman. Another Newsmax Now update in 30 minutes.
With all respect, it's an incomplete plan for dealing with the problem. And it's not a new problem. I mean, we've known about this for a couple of years. All of us have known about it. But in our system of government, it's the president's job to lay out a specific plan for what we should do about it. And it's our job then to say, no, we don't like that, we're going to change this, and respond to that. This is not a complete plan to me. What's missing are 3 things. Number 1, first, we need to secure the 320 miles of border in the Rio Grande Valley where a majority, at least, maybe most of the children are coming. This is an extraordinary, you say unprecedented surge of illegal immigrants, unaccompanied children. We need an extraordinary response. The quickest way to deal with it and to send a message back in those 3 countries is those children are coming home. Second, we need to make it as clear as we can, as rapidly as we can, that What will happen to these children if they come to our country is they'll be treated with respect and humanely and sent home, taken home, as soon as we responsibly and safely can do it. And number three, we need to know from the president what changes he wants to make in the 2008 law that apparently is the source of a good deal of the problem.
It is fair to say that for the most part, Senate hearings are somewhat tedious affairs where most Americans wait for the cliff notes or the highlight version. But during that recent session of the Senate Appropriations Committee and that appearance from Senator Lamar Alexander, an immigration bombshell dropped that did not escape the notice of one state representative seeking to unseat Mr. Alexander in the state's August 7th GOP primary. Let's welcome into MidPoint Tennessee State Representative and U.S. Senate candidate Joe Carr joins us today. Mr. Carr, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Representative, first of all, your reaction as soon as you heard that, I can only imagine that from some people sitting in the gallery and from some elected officials to basically hear Lamar Alexander say, we've known about this for years, and to be sitting on it just had to strike a nerve that just sits with you to this day.
Well, that was a stunning admission and a stunning development that Senator Alexander would have said that he's known about this for 2 years. And then, in spite of his admission about knowing it for 2 years, did two things. Number one, ignored a letter from Immigration's Custom Enforcement officials saying that if they voted yes on the amnesty bill, Senate Bill 744 last year, that it would perpetuate or create this crisis that we now have on our southern border. So Lamar Alexander did two things. Number one, he ignored ICE officials in an official letter saying that this crisis would occur if he voted for Senate Bill 744. And then 30 days later, he went along with Barack Obama, Harry Reid, and the Democrats in voting for amnesty that's contained in Senate Bill 744. And so now, having known about it for 2 years and ignored an official letter from ICE, we now find that he's surprised that we've got this border crisis when he's known about it by his own admission for 2 years.
Was it even more surprising perhaps to hear him say basically that we don't have to deal with this, it's up to the president to do something, bring it to us, and then we'll respond? It seems to some people as if you're an elected official, you need to respond at all times and you need to be in front of the issues that are affecting your constituency.
Well, that is surprising probably to those outside of Tennessee, but for Lamar Alexander, for the last 5.5, 6 years, he's shown a propensity to allow Barack Obama, Harry Reid, and Chuck Schumer to lead him around by the nose, whether it's amnesty for illegals, voting yes on cloture for Obamacare, raising taxes, or voting yes on cloture to take away veterans' benefits. Lamar Alexander has historically voted more with the Democrats than he has with the Republicans. So for those of us here in Tennessee, this wasn't so surprising, but it was deeply disappointing that he admitted that knowing about this for 2 years did nothing except provide amnesty and provide a window to perpetuate and accelerate a problem that we now know has existed for 2 years.
In your opinion, is what we're seeing here part of what some have called almost a waffling on the Republican side over the years? Because, of course, you're going after Lamar Alexander because he will go for amnesty at this point. But basically, a lot of Republicans who said, okay, let's vote here, let's go with the president, let's wait and wait and wait and wait and wait. Now, that would seem to me to be the biggest problem here that we're facing.
Well, what we've got is we've got John McCain and Lindsey Graham and Lamar Alexander and these guys saying we need to give the president a blank check on this problem to solve this problem so we don't have our fingerprints on it, because you got to understand the reason the establishment in D.C., the establishment Republicans in D.C. want this to go away is because the United States Chamber of Commerce is yanking their chain on this particular issue. And the problem is we've got 58 million American adults who are out of work right now. And every year we have almost 2.4 million legal immigrants come to the United States. You put on top of that all the hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants come to the United States, and it's designed to suppress the American worker's ability to climb out of that low income, lower middle income area and produce a working living wage. And so the United States Chamber of Commerce, at the behest of Lamar Alexander and others, is determined that we need an oversupply of labor so we can suppress wages.
Have there been any ripple effects from the border crossings into Tennessee?
We have seen border crossings ripple into Tennessee for years. As a matter of fact, The reason I ran and was elected in the Tennessee General Assembly in 2008 was specifically on the illegal immigration issue in Tennessee, and I'm glad to say that I am the author and architect of every major piece of illegal immigration law that we have on the books, whether it's mandatory E-Verify or whether it's no state taxpayer benefits for illegals or no sanctuary cities, identity theft and fraud, what have you. Tennessee has some of the strongest enforceable illegal immigration laws in the country, and what we want to do is we want to partner with the federal government in enforcing these laws. And to that point, Senator Jeff Sessions has a wonderful layout of a plan about what we need to do to secure the border, what we need to do to deal with those illegals who are here, and the states need to be able to partner with the federal government in implementing this plan. And Republicans need to understand that we need to start deporting those who are here illegally. And that's a word that Republican, especially establishment Republicans, don't like. But if we want to enforce the border, we've got to deport those who are found illegally and get them back to their country of origin.
Is it your opinion then, and you mentioned this, the D word, the deportation word, perhaps in your opinion and those of many others, that Republicans, Democrats, and whomever it is need to grow a spine perhaps and at least face up to the fact that the deportation word is going to be on their record, it's something you're going to have to use, and it's the only way to solve this crisis, in your opinion?
Well, it's certainly a tool in the toolbox, but we've got to use that tool because it's a very effective tool. And we are the only civilized country in the world that doesn't deport those who come to our country illegally to take advantage of those benefits that they otherwise wouldn't be entitled to. The United States of America gives $4.2 billion in child tax credits every year to the parents of illegal aliens, illegal aliens who are here unlawfully. And so all I'm saying is that the rule of law says that everybody is treated equally and fairly under the law. The Constitution says our laws shall be faithfully upheld, and the American worker is entitled to those faithfully executed laws. So what we need is we need a Congress and a Senate that's going to hold a president accountable, and we need a United States Senator from Tennessee that believes in the rule of law, understands the Constitution, and will protect the American worker.
You talked about enforcement a moment ago. I want you to listen to a soundbite here. This is Martin Villarreal. He is the city manager of Granejo, Texas, and he talks about there is no law enforcement in the city. The border agents are limited to what they can do. So in essence, they're pretty much helpless. Listen to this.
I think we would benefit more if we had local law enforcement, because, for example, if Border Patrol comes by and there's some people that are illegally here and they run into a house, Border Patrol can't go in there.
Is it time to call out the National Guard? Some people are saying, let's put some boots on the ground, let's put some troops there, let's help the Border Patrol because they are completely overwhelmed.
Well, it is past time to put the National Guard on the border, and I would say this, if Governor Rick Perry would unilaterally, and he can do this in Texas, would unilaterally put the state guard on the border. You know, there are those of us in Tennessee who would immediately call for Governor Haslam to assist Governor Perry in this initiative. And Governor Perry has the authority to do that. They've done it before, and they can do it again. And Tennesseans, I know, would be glad to assist Texas in this way. We assisted Texas once before in the liberation of the Republic from Santa Anna in the Battle of Texas, or the War of Texas. So we would be glad to do it again, and I think Governor Perry would find there are a number of states around the country that would be more than willing to assist him in this. So the answer to your question is yes.
That's a very good point, because we hear from a number of people that governors can do this, governors can do that. Are we missing a point here perhaps, and is there a power that the governors have that they are not taking advantage of at this point in order to help their states? And if they are not taking advantage of it, then people would ask why.
Well, the governors do have the authority to send their state guard to those areas of the state to protect the citizenry and the sovereignty of that state. It does get a little ticklish because the issue of immigration is solely at the purview of the federal government. But that was my point about Senator Jeff Sessions' bill, in that I fully embrace all components of that bill and think it's a great place to start. But one more provision needs to be added, and that is the tacit approval of the state governments to join the federal government in insisting enforcing immigration laws within that state for which that state wants to comply. So the state of Texas would obviously, I believe, Governor Perry would obviously like to partner with the federal government in the enforcement of these laws, as would Tennessee.
I'll ask you a policy question with about 30 seconds to go. If indeed you were in a position of authority to do this, the president's asking for almost $4 billion for immigration reform. Would you vote for it?
We don't need to grant the president $4 billion. What we have is a failure of the president to enforce existing law. He has plenty of resources available to him to do so. It's his failure to be the chief law enforcement officer of the country that's gotten us in this position. He has all the tools available. He just needs to exercise his presidential constitutional duties.
We will leave it there, and hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about it more in depth. Representative Joe Carr, we thank you so much for joining us. I guarantee we'll do it again.
Thank you. Thank you kindly.
Thank you very much. It is a ticklish subject in many ways. Joe Carr is one of those out here who points out again the governors and the governor's ability to do things, but they can't just sit there and do it unilaterally in many cases. We will continue to cover this story, of course. Are the Israelis within their right to go to ground against Hamas, or should they be seeking to once again talk peace? That and more as MidPoint continues.
Smile. No matter how well you provide for your family today, if you don't have life insurance, their future may be at risk. Think about what would happen if you were gone. Would they struggle to pay the bills and face an uncertain future? They don't have to. You can help guarantee those you love $200,000, $500,000, $750,000 or more with life insurance through AIG Direct. We'll help you get more for your money, up to 70% more. Just look, less than $14 a month buys a 40-year-old man a $250,000 term life policy. That's up to 3 times what you can get from other companies for the same price. No wonder millions of people rely on AIG companies. The call is free, the quote is free, and there's no obligation. Make the future more secure for those you love. Call now so you can sleep better at night.
For a free quote, call 1-800-558-5246 or visit AIGdirect.com.
Hi, I'm Mike Reagan. If you think the worst of Obamacare is behind us, think again. Soon its new rules will affect every business, every insured person, and every Medicare recipient. That's why you need to protect yourself, your family, and your business with the Obamacare Survival Guide. It's easy to read, the fastest way for you to understand this law. The Obamacare Survival Guide gives you the tips, loopholes, and strategies you need to know. If you're insured on Medicare, a business, a medical professional, just about anyone, you need to get the Obamacare Survival Guide. It's a #1 New York Times bestseller, and already more than 500,000 Americans have gotten their copy. Newsmax says it's the best guide to the new law. The Obamacare Survival Guide is at bookstores everywhere, or get Newsmax's $4.95 special offer and save $15 off the cover price. Just go online now or call us today.
Now on Newsmax TV, Paul Ryan is a GOP rising star. Will he run for president in 2016? Watch the Malsberg Show on Newsmax TV and find out. Go now to Newsmax TV.
The casualty numbers are now said to lie at 174 killed and over 1,100 wounded. All indications are, and I find this particularly dramatic, that women and children make up a sizable number of victims of the current strikes. Currently, more than 1/4 of the fatalities are children.
Israel has promised to press the fight against Hamas. The death toll is closing in on the 200 mark. The United Nations calling for peace. And there is debate on whether or not Israel should, in the minds of some, finish the job with regard to the terrorist organization Hamas. Now for some explanation. Welcome into MidPoint, the Senior Research Fellow for Middle Eastern Affairs at the Heritage Foundation, James Phillips, joins us today. Mr. Phillips, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you.
Looking at what has gone on in the Middle East, in that section of the Middle East, because there has been 2008, 2009, Israel went against Hamas there. They did it again in 2012, now in 2014 again. Benjamin Netanyahu says he will not back off. There will not be discussion of peace or a cessation of any of the missile firings against Hamas. It does seem to some as if it's different this time around, that there is that desire to finish the job. Do you get that sense from what we're seeing here in the last couple of days?
I think the Israeli government is projecting that sense that it's willing and able to go in on the ground, but I don't think it really wants to go in on the ground because it knows that not only would the cost in terms of Israeli casualties be a lot higher, but the cost in terms of Palestinian casualties would be much higher. And I think there are two differences this time around from the last two Gaza wars. One is that Hamas, unfortunately, has acquired more dangerous and more long-range missiles from Iran that now are that are able to reach Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. But secondly, this time Egypt is taking a much more strongly anti-Hamas position and has closed the smuggling tunnels, so that will limit Hamas's ability to rearm going forward.
The rearming is something I wanted to discuss because in Israel it is called mowing the lawn, the cycle where they have a temporary disruption of Hamas's ability and will to fire rockets. They have done this before. What is making Israel believe that this time out they actually have a real opportunity to maybe not stop things, but at least slow them down to where it's not coming back at them every year or 2 years?
Well, I think the ace up their sleeves is the fact that they have much closer security cooperation with Egypt after the ouster of the Muslim Brotherhood government in Cairo in July 2013. Now they know that whatever Hamas targets they hit this time will be much harder for Hamas to resupply and recreate. And that means the longer this air offensive goes on, the more long-range missiles they can destroy, the less of a threat Hamas and other Islamist extremist groups will be able to pose going forward.
What does it mean militarily and strategically now that we hear that Israel has shot down a drone? And this is the first time we've heard about this, that Hamas has drones. They're getting them from somewhere. How does this step up the conflict?
It's believed they're getting these drones from Iran. Iran has built a wide variety of drones, including armed drones, although it's not clear that this particular one was armed. Iran also has given drones to Hezbollah, and Hezbollah, on at least one occasion, flew a drone over the Israeli nuclear reactor at Dimona, and in order to send a signal that if there was a future clash between Hezbollah and Israel, that Hezbollah would be shooting for that facility. It's believed the Palestinians acquired the parts from Iran and have put it together inside Gaza. So there could be more drones coming out of Gaza in the future.
How much, in your opinion, will it affect Israel's decision moving forward now that we are hearing more and more about the strikes into the Gaza Strip, where we're seeing 1,700, I believe, or at least 70% of the people who are killed thus far are civilians? And that has to sit badly, not just with Israel, but doesn't it sit badly with the international community here, because you now have Hamas and the Palestinians who are able to paint Israel as someone who is killing the innocents?
Yeah, I think Hamas has adopted a very cynical strategy here of hiding among Palestinian civilians while it hurls rockets at Israeli civilians. And then when Israel replies, Hamas turns around and says, oh, isn't that horrible? Palestinian civilians are being killed. But make no mistake, Hamas is the instigator here, and it is using civilians as human shields, which in and of itself is a war crime.
Does it catch you a little bit that we're not hearing much about that in the general media? We are hearing about the fact that 70% of these are civilians, but what you're just telling us right now is not something that is usually reported in a lot of the mainstream media, that it is a human shield issue.
That's right. When Hamas finds out that Israel is targeting a certain building, and it finds out because the Israelis actually call people in that building ahead of time and warn them that they have a short period to get out. Hamas has been known to try to mobilize people to stand on the roof of that building. And that's just one of the many ways it uses civilians as shields.
Is there any evidence that in this current conflict that they are doing just that?
According to one of the press reports in Gaza, they have done it to at least one building, and there have been other reports of people getting calls in a building. In one case, it was the family of a Hamas official, and they got the calls through their cell phones, which shows, I think, that Israel has pretty good intelligence on who is involved in these Hamas attacks.
Israel says they will continue to step up the fight as long as there are rockets flying from Palestinian territories into Israel right now. From what you know of it and from your experience being involved in watching a lot of what goes on here, how do you step this down at this point? How do you at least bring some sort of momentary pause to it to see if at least they can help save some of the civilians?
I think I'm missing the audio here.
Okay, Mr. Phillips, can you hear me? Mr. Phillips, can you hear me? All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and see if we can straighten that out, and we'll see if we can get his audio back with the couple of minutes that we have left here. There is indeed those questions that are being raised right here, because while we talk about what needs to be done and what can be done at this point, there is also a talk about the United States involvement. I'll get to that in just a moment. But there are those who are calling for Israel to step back. Israel says we will not step back as long as we are being fired upon. Hamas says we will not stop firing as long as we are being fired upon. So again, you have the two sides going back and forth. John Kerry is the guy right now who wants to broker a deal. He wants to see if he can put the officials, the experts, both sides together. He wants to see if he can put together the Palestinians, the Israelis, and sit them down. But here we have then what is considered to be the stalemate, if you will. The Israelis and the Palestinians thus far have told John Kerry, we don't want you here. We don't want you to try and negotiate a peace. The U.S. relationship with Egypt and Turkey have deteriorated since 2012. You heard James Phillips in there talk about the fact that Egypt is now involved with Israel and is all part of this here. The Israelis may indeed feel that at this point they have all they need in order to get this done. Now, Kerry has been in Israel 11 times. He has spent 26 days there since taking office last year. This is all part of the ultimately unsuccessful effort to push the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority into some kind of a peace agreement. It makes no difference who you talk to in the Middle East, though. We have talked to people who are citizens, people who are governmental officials, people who are watching and waiting. Here in America, there are those, and it is a very split organization, a very split group here in America, those who do want the Americans to get involved, those who say, quite frankly, we don't need to get involved at this point. But if you talk to the people in the Middle East, they will say that there is nothing for America to do at this point, that they simply want to take care of what they have, take care of it within their own purview, and they do not need the Americans. Now, at the same time, you have tens of thousands of panicked residents fleeing their homes in the northern Gaza Strip on Sunday when the Israeli military says they're going to drop bombs. Mr. Phillips, I only have about 30 seconds left. He is gone? Okay, guys. I was told he was up, but unfortunately he is not there. So we need to take this for what it is and see if indeed there will be somebody, some way in order to step in and in order to try and stop this down. The Israelis say they will not stop. Also, we point out that fact again, 70% thus far of the people that have been killed thus far are civilians. And if what James Phillips told us is correct, that Hamas is putting innocents in harm's way, then certainly Israel is much less to blame for the deaths of civilians than some outlets would have us believe. We'll continue to follow the stories. Stay with us right here on the Newsmax TV network. This is MidPoint, where every day, Monday through Friday, makes no difference what the issue is. We will cover it from both sides, and we will question everything.
Falls are the #1 cause of injury to senior citizens. Falling down stairs can be disastrous. Acorn Stair Lifts has a solution. Just don't fall. Sit, relax, ride with an Acorn Stair Lift, the world's leader in stair lifts. That's right. Don't let limited mobility keep you from going up and down your stairs, even outside. Call Acorn Stair Lifts now for a free information kit and no obligation quote. Now you can safely ride with your Acorn Stair Lift.
Now I don't have to worry about him climbing those stairs again.
And our Acorn Stair Lift was very affordable.
Our Acorn Stair Lift is definitely more affordable than moving.
The Acorn Stair Lift has a padded seat and backrest for maximum comfort. It easily folds up for access to the stairway. 5 safety sensors stop your Acorn Stair Lift if there's something in the way. And it even runs during power outages.
And I'm the king of my own castle again.
You'll be working directly with the world's leader in stair lifts. That's right, there's no middleman. Acorn's trained technicians professionally install your stair lift directly to the staircase, in most cases in 2 hours or less, with no need for special construction. We don't leave until you're completely comfortable using your Acorn Stair Lift.
Don't risk a serious fall down the stairs.
I was really surprised at how little they cost.
Call for your free no-obligation information kit and quote from Acorn Stair Lifts. Just don't fall. Safely ride up and down your steps.
Give your life a lift with an Acorn Stair Lift.
Call 1-800-514-1402 for your free information kit. That number again is 1-800-514-1402. Or visit our website today.
Call now.
Looking for a home loan? Welcome to PennyMac, one of America's leading mortgage lenders, where all we do are home loans. PennyMac offers a neighborhood of home loan options. First-time buyers? Call PennyMac for some low down payment options as low as 3.5%. Looking for an FHA loan, jumbo loan, VA loan, or conventional loan? Call PennyMac. Want to refinance to save money? Yup, call PennyMac. Home underwater? PennyMac offers a government-sponsored HARP program that can help you reduce your interest rate. So if you're thinking home loans, PennyMac leads the pack with low rates week in and week out, so you know you're going to save money and get a fast closing. So call PennyMac now. We're probably helping some of your neighbors with their loans, and we're ready to help you too. Call the experts in home loans in the next 10 minutes to get a free $50 Home Depot gift card. Call 800-424-1956. 800-424-1956. 800-424-1956.
And I'm Miranda Kahn here now with your latest Newsmax Now update. A final decision on the participation of F-35 fighter jets may come as early as next week. The U.S. Navy and Air Force grounded the entire fleet of jets after a massive engine failure on a Florida air base last month. The fleet-wide grounding has prevented the fighter jets from attending 2 different widely publicized air shows. Developmental problems have kept the planes from flying in the past, leaving some wondering whether the F-35 is the fighter jet of the future. It was all touted to be. Now, speaking of up in the air, Mother Nature packed quite a punch for some unexpected beachgoers in Russia. Take a look. On Saturday, beachgoers had to run for cover after a freak hailstorm hit the beaches of Siberia. Look at that. Cherry-size, hail, in some cases golf ball-size hail, sent the sunbathers huddling together under umbrellas for about 15 minutes. Sadly, 2 girls, ages 3 and 4, died during the storm after a tree fell on their tent where they were seeking shelter. And that's your latest Newsmax Now update.
All right, let's see what's happening on our sister shows right now. America's Forum and the Steve Malzberg Show. Of course, America's Forum before us every day at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Steve Malzberg at 3 p.m. Eastern Time every day. Earlier today on America's Forum, J.D. Hayworth spoke with Danny Danon, the Israeli Deputy Minister of Defense, about violence in Israel, the threat of Iran after nuclear talks broke down over the weekend, and a drone shot down by the Israeli military.
What information do you have on the origination of the drone that was shot down?
We were not caught by surprise. When you had the tunnels coming from the Sinai Peninsula into Gaza, it meant you can transfer everything. and we know that many weapons, rockets, drones, and other means came from Sinai into Gaza, and we were aware of that. That's why a few days ago we asked all of the civilian aircrafts not to fly in the southern area of Israel, but I can assure you that we have the capability and the technology to fight it back and to make sure that the drones will not get into Israel.
Should also be pointed out that the drone that was downed as the Gaza Strip death toll is climbing there in Israel right now, the drone, they do not know what it carried. They don't know if it was armed or not, but indeed it was a drone. And as you heard from our earlier guest, it may have indeed been something that was given to them by Iran. All right, more coming up on that story, of course, as we follow it. Now from Friday's Steve Malzberg Show, House Foreign Affairs Committee member, Arizona Republican Congressman Matt Salmon, discussing the border crisis with Steve.
What possible reason could they have for not wanting to change or adjust the law unless they want these kids to stay?
They got to at least get the same talking points going, because the president on June 30th said he wanted a change in the law. And now these guys, you talk about the Keystone Cops. They need to get on the same sheet of music and sing in harmony. The fact is, the change in the law is needed. The president acknowledged that and asked for it on June 30th, and they need to be responsive. And if they don't want to fix the crisis, then let them go out to the public and say they don't want to fix the crisis. But this would go a long way. In fact, if this bill is passed and the law is changed, much of that money that the president's asking for is not even needed.
Now, the money that he talked about is something that we'll talk about all day long right here on Newsmax. 9 a.m. Eastern Time, it's America's Forum with J.D. Hayworth. 12 noon Eastern Time, yours truly with MidPoint. And then 3 o'clock, it is the Steve Malzberg Show with Steve Malzberg, right back here on the Newsmax TV network. Point to make here regarding that money that he spoke about. $1.6 billion goes to the Justice and Homeland Security Departments for more immigration judges, other resources to clear backlogged immigration dockets, and also there's money that would keep the children here. That is a lot of what we're going to be talking about. Right now, let's talk about a moment that America can still look back on with pride. That day that another human foot touched a celestial body on American Moment.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
In 1961, newly elected President John Fitzgerald Kennedy announced to the Congress and to all of mankind America's intention to send man to the moon. Previously restricted to the realm of science fiction, the president's commitment set in motion an unprecedented effort to fulfill one of man's oldest dreams. The obstacles were monumental, not the least of which was to create an energy source capable of sending a manned spacecraft to the moon. The answer stood 363 feet tall and delivered 8 million pounds of thrust, making the Saturn V the most powerful rocket ever built. On July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11, carrying astronauts Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Edwin Buzz Aldrin, circled the moon until Armstrong and Aldrin entered the lunar module and readied themselves for their historic landing. With just 20 seconds of fuel left, disaster was narrowly averted when Armstrong had to manually fly the Eagle away from unexpected boulders to a smoother and less dangerous landing zone. Although the imagery was poor, Neil Armstrong's words came through loud and clear.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
However, the flight was not without controversy. Buzz Aldrin, a devout Christian, administered himself communion on the moon. Since NASA was already fighting a lawsuit from atheist Madalyn Murray O'Hair, who objected to the earlier Apollo 8 crew reading from the book of Genesis, Aldrin's communion was kept a secret from the public. Not so secret was the plaque bolted to the descent ladder on the lunar module. It was left on the moon to greet future visitors and reads, "We came in peace for all mankind." For Newsmax TV, I'm Bill Curtis, and this is an American Moment.
I'm only in my 60s. I've got a nice long life ahead, big plans. So when I found out Medicare doesn't pay all my medical expenses, I looked at my options. Then I got a Medicare supplement insurance plan.
If you're eligible for Medicare, you may know it only covers about 80% of your Part B medical expenses. The rest is up to you. Call now and find out about an AARP Medicare Supplement Insurance Plan insured by United Healthcare Insurance Company. Like all standardized Medicare Supplement insurance plans, it helps pick up some of what Medicare doesn't pay and could save you in out-of-pocket medical costs.
To me, relationships matter. I've been with my doctor for 12 years. Now I know I'll be able to stick with them.
With these types of plans, you'll be able to visit any doctor or hospital that accepts Medicare patients. Plus, there are no networks and virtually no referrals needed. So don't wait. Call now and request this free decision guide to help you better understand Medicare and which AARP Medicare supplement plan might be best for you. There's a wide range to choose from.
We love to travel, and there's so much more to see. So we found a plan that can travel with us anywhere in the country.
Join the millions of people who have already enrolled in the only Medicare supplement insurance plans endorsed by AARP, an organization serving the needs of people 50 and over for generations. Remember, all Medicare supplement insurance plans help cover what Medicare doesn't pay and could save you in out-of-pocket medical costs. Call now to request your free decision guide and learn more about the kinds of plans that will be here for you now and down the road.
I have a lifetime of experience, so I know how important that is.
My name is Ed Berliner. I'm a host and a news anchor here at Newsmax. This country is desperate for a new voice to speak to that new generation that wants to know it all. Don't give me just half the story. Don't give me a piece of it. Let me get it all. Every single day, when people come to Newsmax, they're going to get an entire story. A new voice, a new generation. Newsmax TV.
We're open on this question of a deal, but remember that one of the preconditions in this interim agreement, what Iran is saying is, all right, we will do this for a while, but 10 years out or whatever the time period, and that hasn't been agreed to yet.
Right, so
at that point in time, the deal's off.
The Beltway buzzes. We dig into what's cooking from inside that den of vipers and such. Newsmax White House correspondent John Gizzi joins us today. John, pleasure to see you again, or to hear you again, I should say. Hope you had a good weekend.
Well, that's good. Occasionally we have gremlins come up in the system, and sometimes we have to have victims. I happen to be one, but we're in touch, and that's what's important.
All right, let's talk about the nuclear Iran, if you will. John Kerry is in Vienna, and I guess what a lot of people would ask is anything different going to come out of this meeting that has come out of any of the other several thousand meetings before it?
Well, I know one person who certainly doesn't think so, and he's a player in all of these proceedings, Ed Royce, congressman from California and chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee. He and Eliot Engel, the ranking Democrat on the Foreign Affairs panel, are pushing legislation for even tougher sanctions against the Islamic Republic. Why? Because they have a long history of not telling the truth. Their sister measure in the Senate is the Kirk-Menendez measure, again bipartisan support, and again backed by nearly two-thirds of the senators. What's standing in between tougher sanctions and becoming actual law is the administration. The president has what Chairman Royce calls a zeal for a deal. And this all comes at a time that Hamas is hammering Israel and its dome with missiles. Where do they get them from? Iran. And its leader, who does not speak to politicians, the Ayatollah Khamenei, is someone who wants to eliminate Israel. As Chairman Royce put it, why should we ever deal with someone who invokes rhetoric right out of Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf? This is where it stands now.
Is it not fair to say, though, that we can also ask a question along those same lines? Why should we believe anything that the Iranians tell us? Because as I'm reading it right here, the serious obstacle in this all is whether Iran should have an industrial-scale uranium enrichment capacity, enabling it to be self-sufficient in nuclear fuel for its nuclear power station. It's almost like a rhyme. We hear it anymore because we hear these over and over again. And I'll tell you what, John, there's people sitting on the outside, the American people, who go, we hear the same thing, nothing happens. There's no reason to trust that Iran ever wants to get close to any sort of agreement. Fair to say?
As Chairman Royce put it, just simply look at what happened when we believed North Korea. And they agreed to go along with missile inspection. They agreed to curb their efforts toward weaponization, and before you knew it, they were launching the Dung missiles. Iran has a long history of not telling the truth on this. Chairman Royce believes that they were stalled for years, that they will continue to keep out inspectors up to the point that they join the world's nuclear club and get the respect of a nuclear power on the world stage. And he said we just can't allow that to happen, particularly when they talk about Israel the way they do.
Speaking of truth, is there any reason to believe we are closer to the truth as to what actually happened or what may have happened in the Mississippi race between McDaniel and Cochran?
I have a feeling I'm going to settle in for some long coverage, long after I thought I'd close my files on this, Ed. Chris McDaniel, who lost by nearly 7,000 votes to the 36-year incumbent Thad Cochran, refuses to concede defeat, and he is challenging a number of the votes that Senator Cochran received in their runoff election, saying these people voted in the Democratic primary and were barred from voting in the Republican primary by law. Now, that said, I would normally dismiss this as a sore loser. Believe me, after 35 years, I've seen a lot of them. However, he has sufficient support. The Senate Conservative Fund, a major political action committee on the right, has pumped in a 5-figure amount to fund his challenge. Senator Ted Cruz, a respected Republican, raised eyebrows by saying they should investigate fraud if it is there. And so it is not as though he's someone alone crying, I was robbed. And that's why I say it'll be a long time before we get the results, as Senator Cochran at 77 prepares to seek his 7th term.
Couple of minutes we got left here. Interesting. You talked to a political consultant in Massachusetts, and there's an initiative here to repeal a gas tax increase on the November ballot. Tell us about that.
Exactly. And by the way, I hate to turn down your kind offers to be on the air and report, Ed, but in this case, I made the right decision because I've got some news for you today.
Yeah.
By being delinquent on Friday. Let's see if I'm right. The Democratic-dominated Massachusetts legislature passed a $500 million tax package recently, and this included a 3 cent per gallon increase in gasoline. And that's not the bad part. Gas taxes go up all the time. It is linked to inflation. So every time the inflation rises, so does the gas tax. That means a gas tax can go on to infinity and then some. Well, the lady I talked to is a longtime Republican consultant, Holly Robichaud. She gathered a few friends together at her home for Chinese food, and out of it came a resolution to repeal the gas tax and link it to the CPI, Consumer Price Index. Now, by itself, you may say, fine, what are Massachusetts voters going to do? Well, one has required 76,000 signatures to get on the ballot in the Bay State. They got 120,000 signature with an all-volunteer effort. 600 people using their own time without compensation, spending less than $10,000. And guess what? The measure's on the ballot. In the birthplace of the American Revolution and taxation without representation, this is a story to be watched. Americans still don't like taxes.
We never have, just to go ahead and put it that way. Just really a minor thing here. But we don't like gas taxes either. That's okay. And John, by the way, you are forgiven for being delinquent on Friday then, for not being able to be here. That's quite all right. You got that story, so that's good to go.
And stay tuned and read the details in Newsmax.
See, now there you're going. It's the next place I was going. Remind everybody that on Newsmax.com. That's where John Gizzi is. You can read his stuff every single day when we're not here, and he brings us up to speed here a couple of times a week and lets us know what's going inside the Beltway right now. There's a look at the Newsmax website, the way it sits right now. John, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Have a wonderful Monday. We'll talk to you later on this week.
Can't wait. Thank you so much. I'll stay cool.
All right. And you will. We won't, of course, in the South, but you certainly will. Coming up, the Steve Malzberg Show is about ready to come right around the corner from New York City. Steve is talking to a lot of folks as we get ready for the midterms and some exclusive interviews. We'll talk about that and a whole lot more when MidPoint continues right here.
Hi, I'm Henry Winkler, and I know there are many myths out there about a reverse mortgage, so I want you to know the facts. There are currently no credit score or income requirements to qualify. You can get tax-free money from the equity in your home. You can use the money to pay off your current mortgage if you have one. The remaining money can be used for anything. There's no monthly mortgage payments, and you still own your home. Call today to get your free guide and DVD. It explains how a government-insured reverse mortgage works. There's no obligation. One Reverse Mortgage is a Quicken Loans company. Their licensed experts can answer all your questions. Call to find out what a great solution this can be. Don't wait. Call now.
Call 800-924-9033 to get your free quote. And when you call now, you'll also get a free lighted magnifier. Call 800-924-9033.
Meet Mary. She loves to shop online with her debit card. And so does Bill, an identity thief who stole Mary's identity, took over her bank accounts, and stole her hard-earned money. Unfortunately, millions of Americans just like you learn all it may take is a little misplaced information to wreak havoc on your life. This is identity theft, and no one helps stop it better than LifeLock. LifeLock offers the most comprehensive identity theft protection available. If Mary had LifeLock's bank account alerts, she may have been notified before it was too late. LifeLock's credit notification service is on the job 24/7. As soon as they detect a threat to your identity within their network, they will alert you, protecting you before the damage is done. LifeLock has the most comprehensive identity theft protection available, guarding your social security number, your money, your credit, even the equity in your home.
My years as a prosecutor taught me that we all need to protect ourselves from crime. In today's world, that includes identity theft. It's a serious problem. We all have to protect ourselves.
While identity theft can't be completely stopped, no one works harder to protect you than LifeLock. You even get a $1 million service guarantee. That's security no one can beat. You have so much to protect and nothing to lose when you call LifeLock right now and get 60 days of identity theft protection risk-free. That's right, 60 days risk-free. Use promo code NOTME. Order now and get this document shredder to keep sensitive documents out of the wrong hands. A $29 value, free. Don't wait until you become the next victim. Call 1-800-918-3128 for 60 days of LifeLock identity theft protection risk-free and get a document shredder free. Use promo code NOTME. Call 1-800-918-3128 now.
I remember the moment.
I'll never forget that moment.
That changed my life.
At that moment, it hit me. This is why I joined the Guard. We're soldiers, always ready to protect our country. But we've also got communities. Family, friends, neighbors who count on us. I couldn't believe it. I just saved a life. Somebody from my hometown.
See what it means to be a citizen soldier at NationalGuard.com.
In Vietnam, we took care of each other.
In combat, you look out for your battle buddy.
I'd do anything for my unit.
When things get tough, it's great to know
somebody's there for you.
Every step of the way.
DAV stands behind America's veterans to make their transition back home easier, with free services and help getting the benefits they've earned. Help us fulfill the promise to our men and women who served. Go to DAV.org to learn more.
Welcome back, everybody. Time to head for New York. That's where Steve Malzberg gets ready to host the Steve Malzberg Show. We would like to apologize, first of all, though, because unfortunately, Steve is not wearing his German colors today. You will, of course, remember that he was indicating to some friends that he was going to show up in full face paint today in the winner of the World Cup. It's a shame to see it, unfortunately. As you can see, Steve I guess the makeup person didn't arrive in time to get it right, but it would have looked great.
Wait a minute,
Steve,
I was going to make you talked about some wager or deal where if I lost, I would have to wear full soccer gear, but I don't even remember what that was.
Well, but see, that's just it. You've forgotten. You were supposed to basically tell us who would win the World Cup, but you weaseled out of it. You didn't want to talk about it. I get it. It's all right.
You didn't. I actually did I flew to Vegas and made a bet where you could bet on anything in advance of the game, and I bet that they wouldn't play it. I lost.
Steve, you gotta stop. Really, let it go, Steve. Let it get out of your system. It's all right.
You brought up soccer,
the
not
world
me.
loves it, Steve. We know you don't. However, I will say this much, just to finish off the sports before we get to some real news here. The All-Star Game is on right now. I'm not as big a fan of the All-Star Game as I was. Like, as a kid, I used to love it. But I do have to tell you, I think it's just absolutely stupid that the winner of the All-Star Game helps to decide the home field advantage for the World Series. That's ridiculous. That's simply ridiculous.
It should be the team with the best record. Absolutely right. They should have the home field. Whoever has the best one-loss record in whichever league, they should host it. But it gives the game a little more meaning, than it had before that was interjected into the whole
It's not supposed to have meaning. It's an exhibition. It's just all it is practice and fun. That's the only meaning it's supposed to have. Right? Come on.
Well, more people watch the All-Star Game than in this country than soccer on a day-to-day basis.
I will tell you what. I will tell you what right now. We will go get the ratings numbers for the U.S., the final game that they played in the round of 16. We will then get the final ratings.
Stop.
Not
World Cup.
Oh, here we go. See,
Come on.
So you're going to go ahead and put it to what? The Major League All-Star Game, that's what? You with the MLS All-Star Game versus the Baseball All-Star Game, right?
Take a baseball game and put it against a Major League Soccer game, whatever they call themselves.
Okay. We're going to get the numbers.
Regular game.
We're going to find the numbers.
Okay.
All right.
Anyway.
Serious stuff here. Very interesting. We had a guest on earlier who talked to us about what's going on in Israel right now. 70% of the people there who are killed are civilians. But he pointed out, as the mainstream media seems to miss a lot of times, that Hamas puts their people in harm's way.
Well, of course they do. They they always have. They use them as human shields in one way or another. They launch rockets and store rockets in mosques. Israel bombed a mosque, reportedly, because there were rockets and launchers in there. This is what they do. Where are the tunnels? Where are the bomb shelters for their people? They have over 1,000 tunnels, but they use it to store and run missiles and store and house Hamas leaders. They don't care about their civilian population. They've always been willing to sacrifice injuries and deaths for publicity. That's the Palestinian culture. I'm sorry to say it's the same culture that teaches their kids in school and on television to hate and kill the Jew. I mean, that's what we're dealing with.
Also, the other piece of the news today, we got about 30, 40 seconds left. Eric Holder saying he sees racial animus in Republican opposition to some of Barack Obama's dealings and such. Playing the race card again.
Of course. And we got John Fund, who just wrote a great book, Obama's Enforcer. It's all about Eric Holder. And for the Israeli story, we have the Consul General to Israel be live in studio with me as well. And Fred Thompson is going to come here and try to sell me a reverse mortgage. So all that is straight ahead.
I understand you need one, though. Seriously, though, tell Fred that in a little role, the role in The Hunt for Red October, he was brilliant. Perfect. Just nailed that.
I will do that.
I'm sure
I will do that.
I'm sure you will. All right, Steve, thanks a lot, buddy. Have a great show. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Ed. Always fun. Thank you.
All right. Reminder once again, don't forget, 9 o'clock in the morning, America's Forum begins it all right here on the Newsmax TV network. J.D. Howard, John Bachman, and everyone else joins you at 9 o'clock in the morning. We're here at 12 noon Eastern Time, and then the Steve Malzberg Show at 3 o'clock Eastern Time right here to complete the live broadcast day on the Newsmax TV network. Rock on, true believers. Thank you so much for joining us. Have yourself a wonderful Monday, what's left of it. And again, we're back again tomorrow on Tuesday because, again, this is MidPoint on the Newsmax TV network, and every single day we are the show that questions everything.